Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 1951 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Vivien Leigh won for her performance in A Streetcar Named Desire. But why did she beat fellow nominees Katharine Hepburn, Eleanor Parker, Shelley Winters, and Jane Wyman? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 24th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which covered the films of 1951. We'll be discussing why Vivien Leigh won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today, I'm very excited to have on the main show for the very first time. She's joined me for some bonus episodes of On Second Thought before, but never on the main show. Editor of Next Best Picture, freelance writer for things like Polygon, Nerdist, Backstage. Please welcome back to the show, Lauren LaMagna.
Hello. Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to just chatting with you. I think probably one-on-one for the first time without like another guest. So
Yeah, and not Survivor related stuff. So this is
that's true.
all good. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, before we talk about 1951, let's just talk about Best Actress as a category. So my first question for you, Lauren, is what is your favorite Best Actress win of all time?
That's such a hard question for
Yes,
Oscar pundits like myself.
sure is.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be like really fancy and go crazy with things, but I also feel like I should just stick to me.
Mm-hmm.
Kate Winslet is my favorite actress of all time.
Mm-hmm.
No one, I think, will ever top her. I think all of her roles are incredibly different and complex. I love how she only uses her natural voice once in a project. I think that's fascinating.
Hmm.
So the fact that she has an Oscar is very important to me, and I know it's technically considered, she maybe should have been supporting. It was campaigned that entire year for the reader for her to be a supporting actress, and because she had Revolutionary Road that year as well.
Yep.
But Kate Winslet is a leading actress, and I'm really glad that she is Academy Award winner. Kate Winslet, I think she should have another one personally. And that year was also the first year I actively started watching the Oscars, and I think that was the year I watched Titanic for the first time. So it was a really crazy moment of falling in love with this woman and then watching her win her first, and sadly only at right now. She should have another one soon.
Yes.
And just, yeah, watching her win and get on stage and just be happy that she finally did it was a really awesome night for me. So I'm going to say Kate Winslet, the reader, is a big one for me.
Nice. Well, I will perhaps make this promise for you right now, live on air. Let's bring you back for one of those Kate Winslet years down
Oh,
the line.
yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, let's do that. But my other question, what would you say is your most heartbreaking loss in Best Actress?
So many.
Yes.
What really makes me sad, in my opinion, are the missed nominations over the wins, because I feel the nominations are something to celebrate too. They're a big, big achievement for actors. So when something like a missed nomination that really should have been where they were getting the nomination for the entire season everywhere else and then just missed the Oscar, that always stings me a lot more than someone losing the award altogether. So I remember like when Amy Adams didn't make it for Arrival, that was just the biggest burn of like in recent time, because again, she was nominated everywhere. The film was not only a Best Picture nomination, it was probably one of the most successful films that year. And to not nominate your leading actress when you're nominated in every other category just didn't seem right to me. And then they have her come to the Oscars, present, because, she's part of a Best Picture nominee.
Yeah.
And just when she killed it that entire decade, not only that year, the entire 2010s, I think, was the Amy Adams year. We can all agree, or decade. And the fact that she killed it in that film, she's probably one of the reasons the film resonated so much with people, and that she just didn't get nominated was just, oh, that hurt me. And and then also I would say something that did hurt me. I know you only asked for one, but
it's okay.
It's a big category, So something about 2016, La La Land just isn't it doesn't mesh with me for some reason. So I think Emma Stone was like my number 3 or 4 out of that category. I really would have loved, Oscar winner Isabelle Huppert or Natalie Portman and Jackie. Like, those were just really great performances. But I really do celebrate, the wins. I am a genre girl, so I love that. Which, like, everyone on Twitter probably knows if they follow me, I love a good genre film. So I love that, Sigourney Weaver is nominated for Aliens. I love that that's a thing. So that makes me very happy. But, like, yeah, when someone continuously is on the Oscar trail and just doesn't get it, that always hurts me a lot more than them not winning in general.
Yeah, that's a really good interpretation of that question. I don't think anyone's ever said that.
I didn't really technically answer the question, but that...
I mean, you did with the 2016 just being, like, entirely heartbreaking in this
That
category.
was a rough year, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a rough year.
Yeah, I mean, I like Emma Stone in La La Land, but I would generally agree that there were probably other better choices.
Yeah, like, she's not even the runner-up for me. Like, that was what was...
Right.
It just didn't make sense with me that year. I understand it was a huge film, but it never connected with me. And I just... Yeah, it's just one of those movies.
Even the ones not nominated outside of Amy Adams, like Annette Bening for 20th Century Women. Like, there were many options.
That year.
Yeah.
It's a
tough one. Yes. Yeah. Well, I don't know if what we're talking about today is quite as painful, but perhaps we'll talk about whether there was someone who we felt was robbed. I don't know. People have different interpretations of this lineup.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, I've heard different takes, but let's talk about it. This is the 24th Academy Awards. Nominees were Katharine Hepburn for The African Queen, Vivien Leigh for A Streetcar Named Desire, Eleanor Parker for Detective Story, Shelley Winters for A Place in the Sun, and Jane Wyman for The Blue Veil, with the winner being, of course, Vivien Leigh. So before we just break down these performances on an individual level, I would just love to know your thoughts just on the whole group here, what we thought of, like, sort of the people they nominated and just sort of the atmosphere of vibe, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like the overall vibe of this group is interesting. It's interesting. It's
for better
really,
or for worse, right?
Yeah, it's really... It's interesting to have a modern take on the Oscar race and then look back in the past. It's very, especially at a year so early in the Oscar history where things aren't, carved out in stone yet, as I guess is the right thing. So there's all-time great performances in this category, yet there's also performances that I would not consider to be a leading performance. I feel like there's a good bunch of supporting players. They're wonderful in their roles, but I just would not consider them leading at all. It's just not their story. Yeah. So those placements are interesting. So I was watching some of these films and I'm like, it's good, but they're not in the movie.
Right.
So
Where
that
is she?
was interesting to have, legends, arguably all-time great performances, and then a couple of decent performances that just aren't leading. So that was a very interesting watching experience, because my Oscar pundit mind is being like, okay, if this film came out now, they would not be in this category at all. And so that was really interesting to think about, how times have changed and how, the race has changed in general, and just observing, what was honored and respected back then versus now. So that was an interesting time warp, but interesting is right now the word I'm saying, because there's some good performances, there's, again, legendary performances, and then there's just performances in general. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I would describe this lineup as a weird one, honestly. That's the choice. That's what I would say.
It's a good word.
We obviously have this big memorable performance as the winner. Many people calling that performance like an all-timer. And I feel like the other nominees sort of naturally just pale in comparison to just the sheer amount of like capital A acting that Vivien Leigh gets to do in her role.
Yes.
But
I
yeah,
would be shocked to find someone. I know, like you kind of hinted at it,
yeah,
but
there are.
anyone who
They're detractors. Yep.
disagrees with this win, I just have to be like, huh?
I have
Because yeah,
questions. Yes.
questions.
Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting combination, and we do have two performances here that are definitely borderline, if not in the wrong category, so I'm sure we'll dive more into that. We also, I think, just from my viewing experience of doing the show chronologically, we're sort of in this continuation of film really exploring these more darker themes and going in a more realistic route in the case of a few of these films. So I like that, but we do also have, you know, an old-fashioned performance here and there. But in terms of just the actresses themselves, fun to have Katharine Hepburn back. Obviously, same for Vivien Leigh. The only new nominee here for Oscar standards is Shelley Winters, who is a real favorite of mine. And then we have some other kind of, you know, recent favorites like Eleanor Parker and Jane Wyman, both of them really kind of in this sort of sweet spot with the Academy. I don't think this is a all-timer kind of lineup necessarily, but I do think that for one reason or another that pretty much all of these performances should be interesting to talk about, to go back to that word. So
Yes.
let's dive in, shall we?
Can't wait.
All right. Well, going in alphabetical order, we're starting with Katharine Hepburn for The African Queen. Funny that you mentioned genre before, because I feel like this is like the closest we can get to like a genre type of performance.
Yeah.
Sort of, you know, but excited to be talking about Katharine again. It's been a while. There was a break of about 9 years between her last nomination, which was Woman of the Year, and then this one. This is her 5th nomination. I do think it's one that really is marking a new phase in her career, like taking on more of a mature type of presence. You know, she's in her 40s now. She's definitely gone through some ups and downs career-wise. She is, you know, in this relationship now with Spencer Tracy, and she was very devoted to supporting him in his career, and in her own career, she kind of had some bumpier hits for a while in the 40s, including playing a Chinese woman in Dragon Seed, which is not great.
Yeah.
But eventually she did, you know, more films with Spencer Tracy, State of the Union, Adam's Rib. So I think here she was kind of on a bit of an upswing again, at least. And we should also mention this is her first movie in Technicolor, and this is the first of 4 nominations in the 50s, so this is a very good time to be Katharine Hepburn. So in this movie, she's playing Rose, who's a British missionary in Africa, and she's with her brother, and they're missionaries together, and it's about to be World War I, and then there's this steamboat captain, Charlie, played by Humphrey Bogart. He comes in and tells them about how it's going to be World War I, and it just sort of riles things up, and eventually the brother is killed. Not a spoiler because it happens very quickly into the movie, but she goes along with Charlie on his boat, which is the African Queen, to try to sort of avoid this whole conflict. But then there's this opportunity that presents itself where they might be able to sink like a big German boat using these sort of makeshift torpedoes. So yeah, I sort of think this is probably the first proper like action adventure type of performance that I'm talking about on this show. Sadly, these are kind of few and far between. But yeah, so before we get into it, do you have thoughts on Katharine Hepburn, the legend, the icon, and sort of what do you think of... Exactly. She is the moment. She's always been the moment.
Always is, always will be.
And what do you think of her in general, and then what do you think of her in this film?
I love Katharine Hepburn, like every other human on the earth. If you don't, hot take, controversial take.
Yes.
I always when I was younger, I used to consider her the most British American that ever walked the earth. That's just how I considered her, which I honestly think still sticks. Yeah. I just think she is amazing and awesome. And if you don't fall in love with her as a, either an acting buff or a film buff, again, I have questions.
Yeah.
So I love Katharine Hepburn. I haven't seen this movie. This was a first time watch for me,
Ooh.
which was always interesting, and that's why I love this show in particular, Kevin, because you get to just like go down memory lane, really,
I know,
and just
right?
introduce yourself to new projects. And
Yeah.
I think this is such a fun movie. And that's like the vibe I have to describe. And again, as a genre girl, you have to award the Academy for every time they celebrate or honor a film that's not, this hardcore drama, that's something that's comedic and fun and exciting. And it's a
Yeah.
new genre for, I feel like, cinema at that time, which was exciting. It felt like a fun theme park ride, I think. Hepburn's having fun in this movie, which I think is always wonderful as a viewer to watch when you see actors enjoy what they're doing and not taking themselves super duper seriously. But I do think she is so freaking good at her job. The first time watching this, it's the scene where she's talking to Humphrey Bogart about her brother, and you just see her with the tears in her eyes, and she's refusing to let them fall and have this serious conversation. And I remember, like, I paused it. I'm like, damn, Katharine Hepburn, you're good at your job. And it's just like, you forget just how effortless she is if you, like, take a few years, I guess, away from watching her work, and then you come back to it. This is it's a fun comedic action adventure role, yet she brings this weight and this element to her roles that she just naturally can do that not a lot of actors can do. It takes a lot of practice and training for actors to get to that level that she so effortlessly does. So the fact that she brought that weight to one of the first scenes in the movie, again, like you don't have to choose to do that, but she does, and it makes the entire film and that character so much more compelling and interesting. So yeah, this was a really fun, exciting film that surprisingly was much more dramatic and much more emotional than it needed to be or should be or was written as. And that's due to Hepburn, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really, really like Katharine Hepburn here. I do find her to be, pretty convincing as this character. The movie I don't necessarily think is like an all-timer necessarily, but so much of it really rests on the performances, like you're kind of saying there, of both her and of Humphrey Bogart. I also think Humphrey Bogart is better than I remember him being. Part of that is just me being sort of bitter about him winning Best Actor.
Yeah, I always forget that this is a winning performance.
It is, and, over Marlon Brando. And
only Humphrey Bogart could do that.
And Montgomery Clift, two all-timer performances in my eyes. But yeah, I think, he makes for a good sort of roguish type. And then she, I think, makes for a very good sort of upper-class missionary woman. I think she's supposed to be British, right? So
yeah, she's British here.
Yeah. So very obviously very good at that, letting her hair down and sort of revealing that she might have some more in common with this guy than she ever expected. It's a classic type of dynamic here that, goes back to things like It Happened One Night. Not exactly like enemies to lovers necessarily. I don't think I would ever really even consider these two like enemies necessarily, but it's like, it's like an odd couple situation.
Yeah, we clash at first, and then, you realize, hey, they're not that bad.
Exactly. So I think they bounce off each other really well. And I will say, and this is no shade to what she had with Spencer Tracy, obviously that was like a lifelong kind of bond for her. But I do think she has a really good chemistry with Humphrey Bogart, and it sort of works for me more than a lot of her films with Spencer Tracy.
Kevin!
Sorry. I just coming with the takes.
Yes.
But I don't know. I think they're just more playful and fun to watch compared to something like Woman of the Year, which can feel like a little bit hostile in the sort of like battle of the sexes and like uncomfortable with gender politics and everything.
Yeah, this is a lot more playful in my opinion.
Yeah, they're like they feel fun. Like equals, right?
Yes, they can't stand each other yet they enjoy the fight, and that just like adds to the the tension and the chemistry, because you always know like when you have that person that like you can't stand but you also like can't get enough of at the same time. There's something so intriguing about them, and they play that dynamic so very well here.
Yes, because it's the passion. There's a fine line between
Mhm.
love and hate.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, just to go back to the beginning, because I do just want to acknowledge the dynamic with her brother too. Just seeing her sort of even caring for him after he was like struck in the head or whatever it is that happens there. There's just like a tenderness there that I feel like we would also see later on in something like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, where you really get this like sort of lived in history between the two of them. And it's a very quick way of just humanizing the character and getting you to like her and sympathize with
Hmm.
what she's had to go through. And in that scene that you're talking about, where her like struggling to even voice what's happened to her brother, to Charlie, uh, and it just sort of like sets up. I think that moment sort of sets up her wanting a little bit of revenge on the Germans, but it's like that kind of steely-eyed Katharine Hepburn. It's something that we haven't really encountered that much up to this point in her career, and I feel
Hmm.
like this is the start of that sort of like tough spirit, sort of independent kind of thing that she would carry on through basically the rest of her career,
Yeah.
like all the way through on Golden Pond.
This is a very good transition for her
It is.
career, I guess. Is that what we could say? Because, she's in her
Yeah.
40s now. She's not the ingenue anymore. She's not,
Right.
the young lady. And I think on paper, if given to the wrong actor, this could have been a very unlikable character.
Oh yeah.
And what she's able to do is she's able to portray a strong, independent woman that still has vulnerability, is afraid to show it, but she's also not at the same time. But you could still see it and you could still feel it. And she makes you root for this very stern, strong woman, where, again, if it's given to the wrong actor that just wants to show that one side of strength, she could not come off as easily liked
Right.
or just like stoic, or just we wouldn't want to root for her. And you need to root for these two characters in order for the film to be successful. And I think that
Right.
just shows how strong of an actor she is. And it's, it's both of them, but I think the film is very dependent on how good the actors are together.
And I love in the beginning just how you might expect her to be this kind of like fish out of water, having no idea what to do on this boat and just being kind of helpless, just wanting to get to like, her destination so that she can be in civilization again.
Yeah.
And she's like a little hesitant at first, but I love how she's
And then
just
she
like
thinks it's fun. Yeah.
right. She just sort of casually brings up the idea of like, let's attack this German boat with torpedoes, right?
And he's like, "Do you know how dangerous the river is?" She was like, "Yeah, but it's just this water. It's fine.
Exactly. Right.
I'm the experienced one here." It's just she's crazy, but
Right.
it's and those comedic moments land. So she's stern, she's confident, but she's also really funny in her inexperience, which
She
again it
is.
translates. And she's doing so many things if you look at it on the actor perspective.
Hmm.
That again, it's not asked on the page, but she just brings that forward, which makes it so much more stronger than it was written as or that it could have been. She really does elevate the material, which is
Yeah,
the
I think they both
sign of
do.
a very
Hmm.
compelling actor.
Yeah. I feel like there's just a conviction that she brings to it that also makes a lot of sense for the character because she's a missionary, right? Like she's an
Hmm.
instructor. She sort of commands authority. And the fact that she's like taken up this mission in Africa is already kind of proving that she's up for a challenge and that she does have like certain convictions. And I feel like that naturally follows that would transfer to her wanting to basically just like co-command how this is all going to go, even if she
Yeah.
has no actual experience in this environment. She just totally adapts to it like very
Hmm.
quickly. And there's just a way that she carries herself naturally just as a person. I'm just talking about the actress Katharine Hepburn, where she's very quick-witted and very sharp and very just carefully paying attention to everything, and she just doesn't miss a beat. So that's what makes her fun to watch, for me at least.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
I do love the moment after they go through the first big ride through the rapids, and she just looks totally shell shocked at first, and you think that like she's just been traumatized by this experience, and then she just makes it clear that she actually kind of like got off on the thrill of it.
Oh
And
yeah.
she wants to do it again.
Yeah, she's like, "Let's do it again." It's so funny, and it's especially more hysterical where Humphrey Bogart, the experienced person,
Right.
It's just like, are you crazy? She goes, no, I could steer. I got it. Let's just go again. And I just think she's so effortlessly funny in this
Yeah.
movie, especially when, at the end of the movie where, Humphrey's trying to like keep a cool and not get in trouble. And Hepburn's just like, oh no, we were planning on doing this, and this is how we were going to do it. Go tell them. Like, we had a great plan.
Right.
And it's just hysterical.
And I love just that moment because I feel like the director, John Huston, and that Katharine herself, they both know that this is going to be a pivotal moment for this character. So we get like this great close up of her totally playing up like how gleeful she is.
Yeah.
This is one of those things where it's hard to compare something like this to something like Vivien Leigh in Streetcar Named Desire, because this is not necessarily like deep acting necessarily, but it's such one of these things where it's such a movie star kind of performance. And I think there's value in that too.
I agree 100%. I think all of these other roles are going to be really hard to compare.
Yeah.
Vivien Leigh as Blanche DuBois in Streetcar. It's just so up there. But this is definitely, if you didn't love Katharine Hepburn at her career at this moment, you're witnessing, the supernova of her star, I would say.
Totally.
And she just proves it time and time again. And this is like, yeah, I might not be, 20 anymore, but I still got it. And I got it a lot more than all the other ladies here. And it's crazy how an actor can elevate a material. And I think this just perfectly proves it.
I'm just picturing like audiences in 1951, especially seeing these two big stars who don't really do this kind of thing regularly, especially her. Like, imagine what audiences were really thinking, like seeing Katharine Hepburn, steering
having
a boat
fun, yeah,
and like diving into the water and letting her hair down and going through these rapids. Like,
oh, yeah, it's stunt heavy, it's adventure, it's totally different than what she normally does, which is so exciting. And it's exciting that, a film like this was honored and received well on this level.
Yeah. I think it helps also that it was a very popular movie, which is something that was very much valued even more, certainly more than it is now at the Oscars. So,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. But of course, they do have their little conflicts along the way, like when he calls her like a skinny old maid and she just like shuts down, and then she decides to actually like pour out his gin.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, as you might expect, they do make up. And also, they, in addition to making up, they make out.
Of course.
What was your reaction to seeing that development?
I became so much more invested in the movie for some reason, which is so not me, but I was like, oh, we're going to fall in love on a boat. Let's do it. And it just reminds me of, like Pirates of the Caribbean or Jungle Cruise, this like weird action adventure, fun stuff. And I think this one kind of tops all of those movies. But it does become, I don't know, I'm normally not about that. I don't think everything has to be romantic or has to be a love story when it's between a man and a woman. There could be just camaraderie and really strong relationships, but it worked for some reason. It was probably the hate turning into love, that thin line, as we said.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I became increasingly more invested in them in general when they became an item, I suppose. And it just became a stronger film for me in general.
Yeah. I think there could have been a version made maybe without that element. I'm sure audiences were probably expecting it at the time, but maybe not as quickly as it ends up happening. I mean, I'd seen this before, and I guess I sort of forgot that it's not as drawn out as I thought it was in my memory, where the two of them have like that tension, that sort of like sexual tension. And I felt like in my mind that they finally kiss towards like the end part of the film, but it's not too long into it that happens. But it works. I forgot about this other scene too, but I thought it was a really good one for Katharine, where she finally asks him what his first name is. After spending almost the whole movie calling him Mr. Allnut over and over again. And he says it's Charlie, and she kind of smiles and says that that's a really nice name.
That was cute.
There's just something very simple about that scene that you might not remember, considering like all the other set piece moments here. But I felt like there was something so warm and so open about how she plays that scene. And I feel like it's the kind of thing where like you're really falling in love with someone and you're kind of like starry-eyed, and it doesn't matter how old you are, really. Like you just want to know more about this person that you're falling in love with. So I think she
Yeah.
taps into that feeling
I
really
think that's
well.
what makes it for me. I think it's their age because
Yeah.
especially when it's like, the 20-year-olds like they're together and then they'll like fall in love. Like you see that in what 99% of film.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's rare when you see that happen with middle-aged actors. It happens, but it's not as common. So that was definitely more refreshing. And and as a person in 2022, and you think Katharine Hepburn, I think of her older and stronger roles personally. So to see her be, I know the age she is in this film and being, the action lead and the comedic lead and the romantic lead and having these vulnerable moments, she's doing most of the genres in this one movie.
That's true.
Like she's checking all those boxes. She goes action, drama, comedy. Like
That's true.
she's got it. So
She's yeah.
so
It gives you
that's
something for everyone. Yeah.
she's feeding. Yeah, she's like, I am going to perform and I'm going to give the audiences what they want. If they want action, I got you. If you want comedy, I got you. If you want me to be the love interest, I still got it. So she's got everything
Give you a good
anyone
like crying
wants.
dramatic scene. Like, yeah,
Got it.
everything.
Like, yeah,
Yeah. And if you want to see her try to sink a German boat, there
got
we
that
go.
too.
Yep. So, but yeah, in the end they do really just become partners, and I do think that they make you believe that the two of these characters will probably just go on and live a happy life together, going on other adventures, and it sort of leaves you on a high.
Yeah,
So,
it's a very fun, exciting, I would say lighthearted, even though there's heavy subject matters in it.
yeah.
But I still think it's on the light side, it's on the comedic side, and I think those are really wonderful movies that you feel happy when you leave the theater, which I definitely know will not be the case for some of these other films. They're
No,
much more
definitely
heavy
not.
and darker and grittier. So it's nice to have, this nice, fun movie where you could, turn your brain off a little bit and laugh and have a good time. Because, that's at the end of the day, or that's what the movies are for, really, is just to entertain and be escapism. And I think this film accurately does that.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking to that, like the ending is truly unhinged,
Oh,
where
yeah.
they get
Just,
captured by the Germans, right? And they're about to be hanged, but they
and they
ask
get
if they can
married
get married first.
naturally. Uh-huh.
Sure. And then at just the right time, the torpedoes go off.
Yeah, and then they just start, swimming in a sink like wreck. And they're just like, what
Right.
should we do now? I guess just chill. It's just start swimming, I guess. And it's just
Yeah.
there's a element of chaos and just go with the flow that just works from like a comedic chemistry way. And it's just like you gotta laugh, and it's just
You gotta
hysterical.
laugh.
And
Yeah.
you're just like mood. You're just in the African River with Katharine Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart just chilling after an explosion. Why not?
But right. And that's like it is kind of just fun to be around these two, and it makes me wish that there were like sequels to this because I want to see more adventures from them.
Oh, if this was made today, there would be a complete franchise, but they would franchise the Katharine Hepburn, Humphrey Bogart
Yeah.
action adventures.
Yes.
They'd go to space and everything. It would be
Uh,
great.
wow. Oh, the places they'd go. Yes.
Really?
Anything else you have to say on Katharine Hepburn in this performance?
Not really. I just think it's fun. Like, again, it's fun. It's exciting. I'm glad that, she has, oh, so many Oscar nominations and oh, so many wins. She's one of the most decorated actors. And I love that this is one of those roles that she has a claim for. I feel she's definitely, an actor of privilege where, she's proven herself time and time again, where the Academy could reward her for something like this. It's definitely, and a one actor of their generation. We see that with Meryl Streep, where, she
Yeah.
could do anything and get an Oscar nomination. It's the same thing here. But I really do love that this film is honored. I think it's a good, depiction of what movies could do and should do. And I think in a category like this with a lot of heaviness, you need some lightheartedness.
Right.
So I think it balances it out really nicely.
Yeah. I just love that this is one of her nominations because this
Yeah.
is one where it easily could have just been passed over as like just a fun little adventure, but not really worth acknowledging for awards.
Yeah. I feel like if
So
any other actress did it, it wouldn't.
probably not. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very true. There's something very unique to Katharine here that, yeah, she brings something out of this character. So, all right. Well, let's move on to our next losing nominee, and that is Eleanor Parker for Detective Story. Let's just talk about this up front. In the history of the Oscars, this is the shortest performance that has ever been nominated in Best Actress.
I wonder why.
Yes. She is in 20 minutes and 10 seconds of this film, and that's courtesy of our friends over at Screen Time Central for that data. Shortest ever, 94 years. So, there you have it.
Damn.
You watched a record-breaking performance for this lineup.
Honored.
Yes. And this movie is about 100 or so minutes long, so I think it's safe to say that she's not really a lead here.
Yeah, I would choose
Yeah.
a different category for her, but congratulations.
Sure. She's not even a co-lead. This is Kirk
Oh
Douglas's
no,
film
yeah.
pretty much from beginning to end
You see her like in one scene in the beginning and then she's gone
for like a full hour.
Yeah, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, this is a good movie. It's just not her story.
You just like forgot what you have to be focusing on here.
Yeah, and then she has the scene and I'm like, oh, okay, I get
Right,
it now.
of course, right.
Yeah.
I think the important thing to remember with category placement at this time is that stars were in lead and character actors and up-and-comers were in supporting. So there was really that sort of almost like a class distinction in a way, where Eleanor Parker already had a lead nomination the year before with Caged. She was above the title with Kirk Douglas, kind of like Tony rules, like she's above the title, and therefore she was placed in lead.
I understand that, but
Yeah. I'm not saying that she should be. I'm just saying that was the reasoning behind it.
There needs to be a rule about category placement with actors. It's always been, it still irks me to this day about how there's no actual rule and it's just, strategy at this point. But
Totally.
it doesn't undermine her performance at all. It's not true that she's a leading actress in this film. She's still an awesome actor and she does prove herself in those, 2 or 3 scenes that she has, but it is 2 or 3 scenes.
Exactly. Yeah. Another thing before we get into it, this is the latest in a long line of Best Actress nominees directed by William Wyler. So he really the guy to go to if you want a Best Actress nomination. And this is adapted from a play of the same name, which had come out only a few years before this, so super quick turnaround. But the film, it takes place over the course of a single night at a police station, and it centers on these detectives, one of them being Jim, played by Kirk Douglas. He's kind of a loose cannon, and he really takes his job seriously and can sort of act rather like the kind of cop you see in cop shows in like the decades after this, where he's kind of like a maverick. He goes a little too far to catch the bad guy, like that sort of thing. But he's also just kind of a despicable person, and he has this sort of vendetta against this doctor who it is very heavily suggested that he's performing illegal abortions. And Jim's wife is Mary, played by Eleanor Parker here, who at the beginning she seems to be kind of like the devoted, loving sort of 50s wife as we're introduced to her. But then eventually she's brought back into the station where we learn some very deep revelations about her past, which actually involves, her association with that doctor. So, yeah, she only has a handful of scenes here, but, I still think she does have impact. For Eleanor Parker, just as an actress, we talked about last week how most people probably know her best from The Sound of Music as the Baroness. But what do you think of Eleanor Parker and her performance here?
I think it's a really good performance. It's the female role, definitely. It's the turning point of the play is her scenes, and that's really where the story gets interesting and it turns on its head. So it's a juicy role. I understand why she was attracted to it and she wanted to be in it. I'm familiar with the play. I'm a little bit of a theater girl, so and
Yes.
this is the time of the film industry where they were really into adapting plays. And I use the word adapt very loosely because it kind of really is a copy and paste of the production. When it comes to these film adaptations back in the day from like the 50s and the 60s, there's not a lot of changes to, the film medium from the stage show, which is fine. It's cool. That's like it's a nice time capsule moment, but it definitely is, the show on stage just with a camera.
Feels pretty stagey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we will. Yeah, and it's definitely going to remain on track for the next decade or so in film.
Yeah.
So it should feel like a play that's just filmed, and I think it's a really great story. I think it's a very interesting story, and I like how we start off with a character that we trust, and then we just slowly hate him as the story goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And her character is the reason for that. She's the character where, you change your opinion on the other character and everyone's reacting to her. And I think she plays those scenes really well. And it's on track for, a 50s hysterics performance. But I think it's very strong. And I think she does her job really well. And you feel her presence, after that revealing scene.
Yeah.
You feel her for the remaining of the film, even though she might not be seen, you feel the toll that she has on Douglas's character.
Yeah, absolutely. I really liked Eleanor Parker in Caged, which was her previous nomination. I found her to be very just naturalistic and grounded, and that was in a category that's full of bigger, very theatrical performances. And what's interesting about this one is that I do think that she does maintain some of that naturalism here, but this is also more of like it's more of a stock character type overall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately there's only so much that she can do with limited screen time. She certainly makes the most of it, but yeah, I would sort of classify it in my growing list of what if there was a wife type of lead actresses here, where she feels a little bit more just defined as the wife,
Yeah,
more so than a real character.
Yeah, she's the character that changes the way we viewed the main character, and it's the reason the main character spirals, and she's supporting that journey. So yeah, she's supporting the
she is
change.
Supporting, yes.
She's supporting
being the key word there.
Yeah, that's what she's doing, which again, is fine. We need supporting characters, and usually in my viewing experience, not so much with TV, but definitely with film, but definitely with TV, I gravitate towards the supporting characters. I think they're the most interesting written characters, in my opinion. So they're not inferior in any way, shape, or form. But the limited screen time definitely, I guess it can hinder, the way Eleanor Parker probably approached this role, where I do sense hysteria in this performance. So when you're probably given not a lot of time to convey this really deep, dark secret that this character has, which, as a woman in the 50s, it's really, putting a weight on her for her to release it. She has to exhale a lot of energy out of it. So, you feel that weight. So I understand the hysterics, but that also could be, a result of her having, only 20 minutes to get that across.
Right. What I do find interesting, though, is that it's kind of a similar situation with Caged, where she starts the film and you're thinking, like, here's this innocent younger woman, and then over time, either she kind of changes as a person in the case of Caged and just becomes, like, more hardened, or here, it's like we fill in the shadings of who this character is, and we learn that she's not entirely the person that we might expect her to be. She's actually lived a very complicated life, and she's had to make some really hard choices. So it's kind of playing with expectations. She does pretty well in delivering just those emotions of what the character's going through. A lot of it's in the body language, too. It's just, I just wish there was more for her to do, and it's kind of unfortunate because as much as I like, Kim Hunter in A Streetcar Named Desire, I do think there's a possibility that, Eleanor Parker really gives her a run for her money, maybe in supporting actress. I don't know.
Just saying. If she had more to do, maybe. I just think, Streetcar is just, it's a great play, and I think the reason why that play is so good is that it does give all of its characters time to shine, where a detective story, it's very much Jim's story, and it's very much, Jim reacting to what's happening around him. And if the play, gave the wife a couple more scenes just to, showcase that, something, she's not, that perfect housewife that America like idolizes, that, which is really interesting. And I know as a concept and a character that would have worked really well on a Broadway stage in 1950.
Right.
So that would have been awesome, and I think she would have been really good in that role because, again, as you said, she's really good at disproving expectations of what an American woman should be or a typical housewife should be. She makes these characters three-dimension, which is, I wouldn't say it was a rarity for cinema back in the day, but it wasn't common. Especially with female characters. So I think she would have been great as it. She does good in this film. Like, it's a good performance. I really do enjoy her, but she gets the point across. But it would have been really cool if she had a couple more scenes here and there, just to like transition out of the police department to see what's she up to, and to see her react to the doctor being in the police station, and hear her husband say what he says and all that stuff. I think it would have made the story more impactful and maybe the film more impactful in general.
Mm-hmm. This is probably one of the rare performances that I talk about on this show where we can literally go scene by scene and just talk about what she brings to it. She has the first big scene in the beginning where she meets up with Jim, and she sort of makes kind of like an offhand joke about filing a missing husband report because he's always at his job. And there's this sort of allusion to her having these complications with getting pregnant. She says she went to the doctor and it's like the same as last time, sort of showing that there's this ongoing problem that they've had. It's a very short scene, and then she disappears for almost an hour. I'm curious for you, maybe having watched this for the first time, was there anything sort of running through your mind about how she was going to figure back into the plot, and whether you sort of keyed into that mention of her with the problems getting pregnant? Like, were you thinking of anything as you were watching it?
Just as a woman, I was just like, oh, she's hiding something. I was like, either she doesn't want kids, which again, that character choice would have been really, again, an awesome one for 1950s, just a woman who doesn't want to have kids. That would have been really cool as well. Or she can't get pregnant, which would have been a big thing. I knew that there was definitely a secret that she had, which I was very interested in. So when she was gone that entire hour, I was missing her because I think it's a strong screenplay where it plants the seeds for the character. Yeah. But I still missed her, and when we were talking, and when the movie's happening where who's guilty, or I'm trying to get the guy, or like X, Y, and Z, I'm interested, but I know that there's a bomb about to drop, and I'm waiting for her to come back. So when she does come back, I'm like, okay, something's about to go down. Mm-hmm. But I love her choices that she makes. I think she's really strong in again, subverting expectations and body language. I'm very much a fan of subtle acting and reactionary acting. That's the stuff that I really gravitate towards. I think, if you're going to be on camera, if you're going to be on film, let's get as close to you as possible and show me everything. And you don't need to be screaming and crying. You could just react. And if you're a good enough actor, I should be able to see it through the camera. And you see her react, and you see, the fear and the concern, and she knows that the jig is up, essentially. Mm-hmm. And it's really cool to see her try for a second to save it, and then when she realizes she has to confess, those couple of seconds are very interesting, and I really do enjoy those moments before the big monologue and the hysteria does happen.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was funny watching this again because I'd seen this before too, and just sort of trying to pay attention to what she was bringing to the film. On the first watch, I was just watching it as a film. There's just watching it, there's so much going on with the police station and all these colorful characters. And to be honest, I don't know if I even really picked up on how she might factor into the plot by the end and the pregnancy part of it, and just like tying it back to what Jim is going through. And I feel like it's just, the nature of this performance is why it's weird to be talking about her in a Best Actress conversation, because you can say that by the end she sort of steals the show, right? Like coming in the third act and giving this big wallop of a ending. But how do you compare that with these other performances that have these full character arcs? It's
Yeah,
like,
and that's where it becomes hard, is like she's great in it, but if you compare her to, Katharine Hepburn, who like it's her story, she's in the
right.
movie, she's this isn't a co-lead situation like The African Queen, or even Streetcar, it's very much Brando and Leigh, going head to head all the time, and she's just not given enough time to compete with, roles of that caliber, which is unfortunate, but that's just the nature of the role, and that's how the role was written, and there was no adaptation to make this a leading contender, which again is unfortunate that she's in this category where she really couldn't have a fight. But she does a really great job with what she's given. It's just you can't compete when you're on screen for 20 minutes when you're competing against, people who are going through this big arc and they have the time and they have the space to tell the story, as opposed to someone who just doesn't.
Yeah, it would be like, if Ingenue Ellis and King Richard was competing in lead. Where it's
yeah, like even the other year where, it was Viola Davis with Fences against
sure.
Michelle Williams in Manchester, it's
right.
You can't, and it's just
you
like
can't compare that. Right.
As much as we wanted Michelle Williams to win an Oscar, she had 2 scenes while Viola Davis, she's so in the movie, and you can't compete. It's too hard.
Yeah. Like I said before, we go through this plot line of Jim having this vendetta against this doctor who it is heavily implied is performing abortions. Not stated because we're still in the Hays Code, but that is what's happening. But at one point, the two of them get in a fight, and that gets physical, and then the doctor suggests that he knows something about Jim and his personal life, and he says the name of this guy who, as it turns out, had been with his wife before Jim. So she's brought down to the station, and she's questioned, and there's a lot of great body language here, like I said, from her, where she's like, it feels like she's walking on eggshells. And
yeah, it's where you feel like she knows her secret is about to explode.
Exactly. Yeah, she's holding on to a lot of that pain from those experiences, and also probably from dealing with her husband, who isn't exactly like a walk in the park to be with, I imagine. Yeah, you see just how she's even like holding onto her purse, like really tightly gripping it, like almost like a security blanket in a way.
Yeah.
And yeah, just being really, really careful to not reveal too much. But then, her ex comes in and gives her this greeting, and it all kind of spills out after that point, which I found to be kind of like a pretty authentic response, especially if, you've built this new life for yourself, and then here comes this guy from your past who you have this tumultuous relationship with, and you almost had a baby with, and is
punished for it.
Exactly.
Like, that's the thing. Like, she's seen as antagonistic in some way, which is horrible. And it's the key moment where you start to hate Douglas's character, because
totally.
It should be the point. By the time he was, spoiler, dying, I was like, good, leave. And it was just like, you completely lose faith in this character as the film and the story goes on, which is an interesting narrative. It's a real fun exercise in acting and screenwriting and directing. But she's the key to it all, and it's the fact that she's villainized for something that Douglas's character had absolutely no presence in. Like, he was not a part of her life when this was happening, so therefore shouldn't care, and therefore is, punishing her for, living a life and, having agency, I guess, in her life and making decisions and doing what she thought was best for her. So yeah, it's her reason why the character shows his ugly side and why we turn against the character, and she plays that part really well, which honestly I think makes her the most interesting character in the entire story.
I agree.
And again, that's what supporting characters, they're some of the best ones. But she plays that turn very well, and I love how she never gives in of saying, you shouldn't blame me for it. And I love how the character is smart enough and strong enough to be like, okay, if you're gonna hate me for this one thing that I did in my life before you were in my life, then we're not going to be a thing anymore, sir. And she, is strong enough to, leave him, which I think was an awesome scene as well. And that really enforces the spiral of the Douglas character as well.
And that moment where things really take a turn, where he says that he wants to wash away like the dirty pictures that she's put in his mind.
Yeah, like, screw you, man. It's just like,
yeah, but it's like he wants to just like make everything clean again, like wash this all away. And you see her making like the mental calculations that this is not a loving relationship. He does not love her, that he's exactly like his father, who had his own sort of fraught relationship with his mother, apparently. So she sees that the cycle is repeating, right?
And she's strong enough to, have faith in herself that she's going to get back up, which, that wasn't a thing all the time in the 50s or the late 40s, where,
No.
you hear and you see a lot of films where, the wife stays and she just deals with it. And it's awesome to see, a modern woman have, I wouldn't say faith is the right word, but she has confidence in herself that she's going to be okay. And she knows what's good for her and what's not good for her. And she's recognizing that and saying, you're being an ass. You shouldn't be behaving like this. And I'm not going to make myself suffer for, your immaturity. So goodbye. And that was an awesome scene on her part. And you're just on the opposite end of the screen. You're like, you go, girl, like leave him, go. Yeah. And it was a really great moment.
Is this good for her cinema?
Yes, it is.
But yeah,
so. It was good. It was just like, you got it.
Yeah. I appreciate that the film by this point is showing her to be in the right, and having the audience's sympathy with her, not the person who's supposed to be like the protagonist of the story, quote unquote.
Yeah, and she's the reason why he turns into the antagonist. Like the audience, you should be against the character by the end of the film. You should not be with this guy. She's the reason for it, and you turn your allegiance, which again is a testament to acting, directing, and screenwriting. It's a really fun thing that this film does, and it's testament to Douglas, and it's a testament to Parker that they are able to turn the POV really and to be like, this guy is not good, and you should actually be a fan of her because she's just living her life, and she might not be in the film that much, but her presence is felt, and you still trust her and you support her. And that's, again, it's a testament to all the creatives involved, and it's really, really awesome when it's done well.
Yeah, I think she gives quite a bit of humanity to the role and definitely navigates the kind of gray area of how her character's feeling about her situation pretty well. It's just such a limited part that it's hard for me to get too excited about it ultimately.
No, I get it.
But I will say, to her credit, and this is maybe going to sound like an insult, but that's not really the case here. Just in doing this show, there are a lot of actresses who are very defined by their personas, like Bette Davis, Katharine Hepburn, even like Barbara Stanwyck, Irene Dunn, where their films often feel like these showcase star vehicles. And like when you think of the performance, you think of the actress. And with Eleanor Parker, it's a little bit different because honestly, sometimes I have a bit of face blindness when it comes to Eleanor, where it's not like she has like these defining features that make her into this sort of unique kind of persona. But I also think that's exactly what a good actor should be able to do, is to disappear into a role and just get you to focus on just what the character is going through rather than like what the actress is going through to pull off this performance, if that makes sense.
No, yeah. Especially, people, we get too comfortable with the actual actor that it can become hard to not see the actor, especially if we love them so much. And it's really awesome, and it's kind of rare when you could see the actor fully disappear. And I think this character is the secret weapon of the story, and I think Parker is therefore by extension the secret cast member, really. She's not used enough, but when she is used, she gets the job done, and she really does elevate the film from a strong film to a really, really strong film. And it's cool when you have this secret weapon and the audience doesn't know what you got in your back pocket, and then they just let it rip at the end, which it's exciting.
Definitely. And kudos to Eleanor for getting this nomination with such limited screen time.
That's impressive. Like,
it's an accomplishment.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
haven't really talked about it when an actor
Yeah.
successfully does the category fraud.
Totally.
You
Especially
gotta give
going
it to
from supporting someone who should be in supporting getting nominated in lead. That's
yeah.
impressive, I think. Because
It's
it's much easier to do the other way.
oh no, it's definitely, a achievement of star power where,
Yeah.
we're all aware, you shouldn't be here, but we're gonna let you hang out because you're a leading lady and
But
we
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 like you so
respect
much
you.
that you're
We
a
like
leading
you so
lady in
much.
our eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, just going back to like the my best actress winner. She's not really a leading, but we love you too much. So, it's a
Exactly.
level, yeah, it's a just
Yeah.
testament to her star quality.
Yeah. I think she was definitely in a sweet spot with the Academy at this point because she also didn't get any nominations or wins for this performance leading up to the Oscar nominations. Like, this is one of those out of the blue kind of
Ooh.
nominations. Not that there were a lot of precursors back then, but there were. There were people talking and sort of these critic notices and everything, and they praised her, but she didn't get any nominations, unlike I think pretty much everyone else here. So good for her.
Good for her.
Yes. All right, let's move on to Shelley Winters for A Place in the Sun. I am very excited that we've arrived at Shelley Winters, even though this is actually the only time that I can properly talk about her on the main show. She got 4 nominations in total from the Oscars. 2 of them she won in Supporting Actress for The Diary of Anne Frank and A Patch of Blue. And then she got another Supporting Actress nomination in the 70s for The Poseidon Adventure. Speaking of fun action-adventure movies. It's a wild part and a wild nomination. But she was an actress who was really a bold personality, always willing to go for it. Just to get into her background, because we haven't talked about her before yet. She arrived in Hollywood in the early 40s. She took on a lot of bit parts, but not really breaking out very much until her role in A Double Life in 1947, which is what Ronald Colman won his Oscar for. She was in a version of The Great Gatsby. I think she was sort of thought of as almost like a Mae West type, sort of blonde bombshell kind of typecast. But apparently she got tired of those kinds of roles, and that's where A Place in the Sun comes in. And I read that she really fought for this part, which, she washed off her makeup. She goes full natural, I guess we call it deglam now, and it really became her most acclaimed work up to that point and really cemented herself as a serious actress, landing this nomination at the Oscars, and it was all kind of up from there for her. So this is a little bit similar to what we just talked about with Eleanor Parker in Detective Story, where A Place in the Sun isn't really about her necessarily. It centers on Montgomery Clift playing this character of George Eastman, but I would say that she factors more into the plot, at least. There's no question to me that she would be placed in supporting if this had come out today, and honestly, I imagine she could have had a shot at winning. Maybe, I don't know. But the film is about George, who is this nephew of a rich businessman who gets him a job at his factory, where he develops this romance with Alice, a factory worker played by Shelley Winters here. But at the same time, he has his eye on another woman named Angela, played by Elizabeth Taylor, who is much more glamorous, richer, more the kind of person that George wants to be seen with, which results in him neglecting Alice, who, as it turns out, is now pregnant. So George kind of has to face this dilemma of what to do, and he ultimately decides to take rather drastic action to get the kind of life that he wants to live. So let's talk Shelley Winters. Lauren, I don't know if you have any kind of history with Shelley Winters or this film, which I happen to love myself, but what do you think of this performance?
As you said, this was another performance that I was like, this is really good, but we're not a leading lady. Which again is unfortunate, but it's just is the truth. I haven't seen this film. This is a first watch for me, and I loved this film so
Yay.
much. I thought it was so good, and it was on the edge of my seat. And even I think she does have a significant more to do than Parker did.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see a debate happening with this role if it came out at this time, but I do think it definitely would have been in supporting. But the fact that Elizabeth Taylor is also in this, like I could see the argument happening. I could see a
Hmm.
debate.
Yeah.
But I think she was so good in this, and that she plays that average person so well, where she meets this really nice guy who she kind of knows is out of her league, but he has interest in her, so let's go with it. Falls for the guy. And then the worst deal breaker happens, where he meets Elizabeth Taylor and she falls in love with
Yeah.
him, which is the worst thing that could ever happen to a woman, because like
How do you compete?
you can't, like, it's so unfortunate, and every single like person watching the screen is like, yeah, she's nice, but if Elizabeth Taylor is interested in me, like, you gotta go for Elizabeth Taylor. I get it. I understand. But I think her presence is so strong in this film, to the point where once she does leave the film, which is probably, I don't know, like halfway or two-thirds of the way in,
Yeah.
you feel her the entire length of the film. So the stakes of Montgomery Clift is felt, because the desperation that she had within the film, and that she is essentially a good, genuine woman who just wants to be happy. And there's a purity to her that you feel that she's just in just a really bad situation, and she just doesn't know how to handle it, which is super duper unfortunate. And
Mm.
I love the average, everyday, innocent girl who just doesn't know how to hold on to something that she knows is slipping from her. And I think that performance it's heartbreaking, but it's so well done on her part.
Yeah. I think Shelley Winters is really good here. I actually think this is her best nomination, even though I love that, she's literally playing like the worst person in the world in a patch of blue. There's just like no humanity to that character. Whereas here, there's some real nuance to what she's doing and how she's operating in the context of the film, where, yes, it's kind of a wife slash girlfriend role, but she's given the room to make her a more complex character and show that even though she's ultimately a victim and therefore is someone that you should sympathize with, she also has her faults at the same time. She's not perfect. And that's why casting Shelley Winters is perfect for this role, because she was not afraid to be a little bit irritating at times if the role calls for it. And that's something that evolves over time, I think, where in the beginning she's just this regular factory worker. She doesn't have like the fancy clothes of Elizabeth Taylor. She's not rich and thin. Like, she doesn't look like a model. But there's a certain charm about her, and the way that she's looking at George in the factory and the way he looks at her. You can tell there's a real connection
Yeah.
there. And there's something very sweet and
It's
endearing
so
there.
sweet. Yeah, the
Yeah.
beginning part of this film it's so sweet. And
Yeah.
she plays that everyday average girl so well. And I love that this character, again, yeah, she has her moments. She makes these really weird, annoying choices
Yeah.
that it's pure out of desperation, where you realize that this woman's never been in a situation like this before. She has no idea what to do. She had no one tell her what to do. Everything, she's on her own.
Right.
And she's desperate. She's clinging to something, where and you feel for her. Like, that's the thing, you feel so much for her, where that she's kind of, what she's doing is a little too much, but you totally understand why she's doing it.
Yeah.
And you just want to give her a hug and just tell her, okay, you got to calm down, girl. And but you believe her, and you never not root for her, even though she's making very poor choices along the way, because
Right.
that in her heart she just wants this very one thing, which is a very simple thing, is just to be loved and to not lose the guy that she loves, which is, again, it's really sweet and really tragic and just sad. And you want to hug her and just tell her, get your shit together, girl. But it's a very sweet performance, but it's, oh God, you feel things.
You do. And I think that first date that they have, where they're like walking around town, I guess that's sort of a date. I think that's really sweet. And I imagine that she thinks that he's out of her league, because she says like the Eastmans have this sort of reputation. And the fact that, you know, he looks like Montgomery Clift, you know, it's a little bit intimidating.
Yeah.
So that's what's causing her to be sort of shy and soft-spoken in the beginning, at least, and a little bit cautious about letting things progress too much, because she wants to know that he's not just another Eastman who wants to take advantage of her, right?
Yeah, and you know from like her performance, this guy having interest in her makes absolutely no sense to her.
Yeah.
Like
So
you
there's like a
get
little suspicion there.
yeah, you're just like, what did I do? I'm literally just sitting here.
Right.
I'm an average everyday girl. It does like it you can tell that it doesn't make sense to her, but she's going along with it because hello, it's Montgomery Clift. He's really cute. Like because
Right.
she's just a girl, you know, might as well.
Right.
So she's going along with it, but yet is in total disbelief of how serious it could potentially be. So you feel that, you know, her, you know, feeling out the tide and her kind of not believing what she is feeling, which is really interesting. And I love seeing, you know, that performance at hand. And even when she does, you know, fully fall in love, it becomes too, it's too much for her. And it's really good. I wish there was more of her in it, but I think, you know, her chemistry with Cliff is really strong. And I think, and I love that the character has agency. She's not just the girlfriend, in my opinion.
Right.
She's definitely a character that has her own thoughts, needs, wants, opinions. She is not just reacting to the leading actor. The leading actor is reacting to her.
Yeah.
Which I think separates, you know, her from a fully supporting actress. Again, I definitely see the argument in this, even though she definitely is a supporting player. It's Montgomery Clift's story.
Mm-hmm.
But there's arguments. She's definitely making moves and making actions that causes Montgomery Clift's character to do what he does.
Absolutely. So eventually they do connect more. They kiss, they have sex, implied sex. We don't actually see anything, but it does happen because she ends up pregnant. And then meanwhile, he's gone off to a party with all the pretty people in town, including Angela, the Liz Taylor character. And when he comes home late, we just see her sort of sitting in the bed in the dark, sort of despondent, clearly having waited up for him. And I think in that moment, she's already realizing what the future might be for them, where she's stuck at home while he's, you know, hobnobbing with the rich people in town. And she might have an unhappy life ahead of her. But she's also having this suspicion that they are in real trouble. I think she says something like that they're like in trouble because she's pregnant. So she might be trapped in this situation. They're also not married, and this is at a time where there was some real shame attached to that. And we get this long, extended scene, pretty much an unbroken take, from what I remember, of the two of them talking in the bedroom. Unfortunately for her and her performance, we only really see his face because, like, her back is turned to the camera for the whole scene.
Yeah.
But we can at least hear what she's saying and her line delivery and how almost broken she feels, and it's very impactful. And I love all the even like digging in of like saying that Angela, of course you might think she's pretty and she can afford all these nice clothes, and
But she'll be ugly one day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's interesting how if I'm going to categorize like the two characters that are really supporting players, it's this one and Parker's, but they're kind of opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of female characters of this time. You know, Parker was strong enough to, you know what's best for her and leave, and this character is fighting with all of her might to keep what she has. She really doesn't want to be single, and she really wants to keep the guy, which is a choice, and I respect the choice, and she's definitely making it for her own. She thinks that's the best that she can do in her situation, which I completely understand. You feel the desperation. You feel her try after attempt, and giving her, I guess her statements as if she's an attorney trying to argue. Okay, I know why you like Elizabeth Taylor. I get it. I like Elizabeth Taylor too, but I can do this. I can do that. Like she is really trying to make the case for herself in every single scene she has with him after their encounter. And you feel how desperate she is, that she wants to make this work, and she wants to make this okay and manageable. And you feel that, and it makes you root for her and feel bad for her and feel empathy for her and sympathy. And, all of those melancholy emotions where it's not the best and she's fighting a losing battle,
Yep.
but she's not evil or in the wrong. You understand where she's coming from and why she feels so strongly about this situation that she's in, and why she feels so strongly about the reason that they should stay together and get married and do the white picket fence. And even in her final scene, she's like, we can be happy, like we're just going through something. Everyone goes through something.
Yeah.
And it's so heartbreaking, and it's authentic, and you could feel that this woman is in so much pain for something that she doesn't really have a say in. It's like he's just not into her, and she knows it deep down.
Yeah.
And it's so hard. You feel so bad for this character, yet you really don't want to see her fail at the same time. And it's a very weird mix of emotions.
Absolutely. And I think we should also talk about the scene in the doctor's office, which is really the only time I think that she gets a scene to herself without George. And she says that she has a husband just to be agreeable. And there's quite a bit of shame, I think, that she's feeling as she's admitting that no, she actually isn't married. And I think there's also a bit of, shared DNA between this performance and Eleanor Parker's, in the sense of a woman really having to grapple with the idea of pregnancy and whether or not to keep the baby, whether that's the right decision for her. And I think it's sort of implied here, too, that she wants an abortion, or at least is hoping to speak with someone about her options. And the doctor really doesn't help her at all and says that he can't really recommend anyone for her situation, which I think is something that a lot of women had to face in that time period, and now sadly are facing in modern day too.
Yeah, again, it was fun. It's fun to watch at this time as an American woman. Like this and Detective Story. They were interesting.
70 years ago.
Yeah. Woo.
Yes.
Fun.
Yep.
But yeah, you can tell that this character is really, to say she's in between a rock and a hard place is such an under exaggeration of what she's in. She really can't catch a break. And again, she's not a bad person. Winters is so good at conveying that, she's not a malicious person. She's not an evil person. She's just trying to make it, and she's just trying to be okay and find some sort of happiness within her life. Mm-hmm. And she's in such a horrible situation that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and she just can't catch a break, and she's trying so desperately to catch a break or just to breathe for a second. And you feel it get worse and worse and worse for her, and you can tell that she can't really say what she really feels at the same time, whether it's to Cliff or to the doctor or to anyone she's around. She can never fully say what actually is going on because she's afraid, and she's afraid to get in more trouble. And it's heartbreaking, but Winters is so good at conveying the desperation and the fear and the anxiety that she's gradually getting more into as the film progresses.
Right. Which is around the turning point, I think, for the character, is when she is more or less threatening to blow up his life.
Oh, yeah.
Because she sees him going off with Angela all the time. Yeah, he's in the paper. Now she has evidence of what he's been doing. And, she makes that phone call, and eventually she's threatening to kill herself if he doesn't marry her that night. Just in rewatching it this time, there were some flashes that I had here, a little bit of a Glenn Close and her performance in Fatal Attraction, where she's become consumed by this idea that they have to be together just because of how he's treated her so poorly. And she's kind of coerced him into being with her by using these big threats and guilt tripping. So I think you really are seeing how deeply unhappy she is, and how even if they do get married and they do have a kid, they're both going to be miserable. Like, this is not going to fix everything.
No,
she may say that at a certain point, that like once they have a kid, maybe it'll be all better. But that's a very problematic way of bringing a kid into this world.
Yeah, fix the
and
babies
using that
never
as
work.
An excuse. Yeah.
And she also knows that that's probably not true. Like, you could see it in her face that she's probably
down.
Like, this is bad, babe. But as far the farther the film goes, her grip on him gets tighter and tighter and tighter, as she knows that she is losing him still losing him. And then once he's really completely gone and he's very much in with Angela,
Yeah.
her grip gets so much more tighter, and it does become, a little obsessive, a little clingy is too weak of a word to describe it. But you can tell, like, this is the only option she thinks is doable with the cards she's dealt with.
Yeah.
And she's going to fight like hell to keep it, to just to be somewhat okay. And as long as she, maybe she has the kid and she loves that kid and she has, a purpose in life again, that she'll be okay. You understand her point of view. You understand why she's doing it. And even though she's going about it in a very wrong way, it makes sense. It's not weird, and she's antagonistic, but I never consider her the full villain.
No,
she's
definitely
a very complicated character, and it's a joy of a character, I bet, to play, and I bet Winters had such a great time, digging into
for sure.
the psyche of this character, because it's a very juicy one. And because she makes mistakes and she makes worse mistakes, and it gets worse and worse, and the snowball just builds. But as an audience member, you understand, how she got to this point. And again, testament to her, testament to the writing. And I would love to just like find video footage or an interview somewhere of her just explaining, how she mapped out that arc and the through line, because it's interesting. It's a good one.
Well, she has written multiple memoirs, so if you want to dig into them, they're very juicy. I haven't read them personally, but other people have said they're very, very juicy. But we have the final moments for Shelley Winters, where he persuades her to go have a picnic by the lake, and she agrees to it, and he puts this whole plan in motion of drowning her, basically, going out in a picnic out in the water. Really, really tough final scene to watch. She says that she wants to live in a little house just big enough for the two of them, and then she just throws in, only there's going to be more than two of us, isn't there? It's she really wishes that he loved her again, and it's just really, really, again, very tough to watch. And she just delivers on this fine line, I think, between making you really feel for this character, but also showing from his perspective how she's kind of become like this thorn in his side in a way. Like, he's not really seeing things from her perspective. So to him, she is just like this clingy, almost like an anchor for him and what he wants to do with his life. So they both are really showing you what they're both thinking in this final scene, for her at least.
It's a brilliantly directed scene.
Yeah.
Because, you see both of the character sides. You see how they're both making mistakes. He won't dump her. She's too clingy.
Yeah.
They're both not communicating. They both have different needs and different wants. And you see all of that within the monologue, I guess, of Winter. And it's such a great direction, because it's just her talking from my memory of just her, again, trying desperately to keep him. And you can just tell by just Montgomery Clift's face, he's gone. There's no way that he's coming back to her, and she lost, and she knows she lost, but she's trying one more time of just, well, we can just have a house. I'm not afraid to be poor. I'm not afraid to be, not the best situation, but we can make it. It'll be okay. And it's, again, it's a painful scene to watch, but it's so good from, an acting and a directing point of view, because everything is working the way it's supposed to work. And it's, that's that beautiful symphony where everyone's doing their job exceptionally.
Yep.
From Winter's delivery to Clift's reactions to the directing of capturing both of them at the same time through the shots. And it makes that moment super duper impactful. So
totally,
once the horrible tragedy happens, because this accident happens, you feel for every player involved, even though drastic errors were made to get to where that they are.
Yeah, the moment when she stands up in the boat, I remember watching it the first time,
like,
and I'm like, oh girl,
no.
Oh, girl. Yeah, it's tough. And she's gone for the last 40 minutes of the film, which probably hurt her when it came to voting in the end, because it's so much about Montgomery Clift, and even Elizabeth Taylor really steps it up in the final few scenes, where even though I think the presence of Alice definitely looms large over what's to come, clearly she's just not on screen at all. Like, we don't get any flashbacks or anything, so it's hard to really say that she's a proper lead, unfortunately. Even though for the middle portion, I'm like, yeah, maybe she did earn this leading placement, but then I forgot just how long it is.
Yeah, like it
that
really
she's
is
not.
Montgomery Clip story.
Yeah.
If I think someone could challenge Hunter though for supporting, I think
Mhm.
it is her here.
I agree.
I think this would have been a really interesting fight and a really fun race to track
Hmm.
if they bumped her down here, which
Yeah.
again, I see the argument for lead because, Taylor is also in this film and she has a part in this film. Like there's a role, there's scenes there, and she is Elizabeth Taylor. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
there's an argument made if if Winters was bumped down to supporting, would there have been three acting wins for Streetcar? I don't
Mm.
know. I don't know if I
Yeah.
could
Especially
say.
because A Place in the Sun did very, very well with
Yeah, like
wins.
that's the
It
thing.
won
They
six
won more
Oscars.
technically, like you
Yeah.
would say. So
Yeah.
there's a fight. It's competitive, and
Yep.
Winters is very competitive.
Oh, yeah.
So
So,
in another world, maybe.
yeah. She'll just have to settle for her two other Oscars. I think
I
she's
guess
fine.
she'll be okay.
Yes. All right, let's move on to our final losing nominee, Jane Wyman for The Blue Veil. So this is an interesting one because The Blue Veil apparently has some legal issues where it's not officially on streaming, and it also never got a release on physical media. So it's been more or less forgotten to time, unfortunately.
It is a
There,
hidden gem.
it is.
It's
There's a
hidden.
there is a way that we were able to watch it, thankfully, but the version that we were able to see is not exactly of good quality, especially compared to the rest of these.
We did a
It's
little bit of digging, I guess you could say.
yes, yes,
Hmm.
and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Um, it's never been restored, unlike the rest of these, so not a great situation there. But this is Jane Wyman now on her third Oscar nomination. The last time she was nominated, she won for Johnny Belinda in 1948. So this is just a few years later, and she is playing a type of character that Oscar voters really liked in the 40s, especially, which is the kind of saintly mother figure type. So she plays a widow named Louise who has a baby that ultimately dies. She and dies in childbirth. So she's already gone through quite a bit of trauma at the beginning of the film. And then she goes on to find work as a nanny for various people's children. And the story is basically about her moving around from family to family and sort of accumulating these experiences and in a sense kind of feeling like a sense of family even if it's not biological. So any thoughts for you on Jane Wyman as an actress, and what do you think of her performance in this little hidden gem?
I really like her. I think she's a very interesting actor, and
Mm,
I've seen her in a few things. Like my mainly like TV episodes and like
yeah,
that
makes
my
sense.
grandma would show me like from time to time. I remember her being on TV a lot. And we're gonna disagree because I really like this movie actually. I think it's a really cute, sweet, simple movie. I think she is borderline exceptional in this movie. I think the film is definitely not as good as she is. I think she elevates it from
Hmm.
an okay movie to a really good movie. And I think it's very warm and it's very sweet. And I take care of a lot of children. I'm not a full-time nanny, but I definitely, have a lot of kids that aren't my kids, I guess is that's how she puts
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
That, I take care of, and I know that bond that, a caregiver has with strangers' children, which is, it's an interesting, weird relationship where, you're raising other people's children that just don't have the time or the means to actually take care of it for whatever reason. So I have a personal connection to
Hmm.
being, a caregiver to small people, as I call them. So I understand, the love that she has for these children, and to see her age from, a young woman to an elderly woman. I feel like she was, what, 30 something at
Yeah.
the time of this film? Yeah, to see her age, over the course of the film, this is fully her story, which is unlike the other nominees here. I guess you could
Right.
say, this is she is the main character. It is her story. She's going on the journey. She's reacting to everything, which you got, which makes her, the outlier. She is the full leading lady, the number one on the call sheet. It's not a co-lead, it's not supporting. She is the girl.
Yep.
So you gotta give it credit for that. And I think, again, it's a very sweet, simple, cute story about, just a woman making a living, trying to do the best job that she can, and the complicated mixed feelings that comes with, opening your heart to someone that you're going to say goodbye to. And it pulls on your heartstrings, but I think it's a very cute movie, and I think her performance really does elevate it. It reminds me a lot of the biopics we see nowadays, where we're like, she's great or he's great. The movie's okay, but they're fantastic.
Right.
Where
Gotcha.
like it could be better and it could have been exceptional if the film around the performer was at their level. But it's still an enjoyable watch, and it's still a very sweet, cute, pure watch. And it made me like really kind of like tear up at the end, because I thought it was just, again, it's sweet and it's innocent and it's pure. And I wish it was as strong as Wyman's performance, but I'll take it as it is. But I might fast forward to the second half, because I feel like the first half kind of does drag a little bit.
So I really like Jane Wyman as a screen presence. I think she can be quite versatile in the kinds of performances that she can deliver. Like, her first nomination in The Yearling is like this very stern, cold mother type, which is like the opposite of this. And then with Johnny Belinda, she's playing this young, deaf woman having to show so much emotion just from her face. And then here, more of a warm maternal figure. I mentioned that, they love these kinds of roles in the 40s specifically, which is also to say that I did think that we might have moved on from these kinds of roles in the 40s. So, granted, the 50s were obviously a time in America where there was a lot of conformity and kind of conservatism. So it's not like going from the 50s to the 60s. But there's part of this that definitely feels dated to me, even at this point, that I didn't maybe get as much out of it as you did. On paper, I do think that this has the potential to be a big, huge, emotional, tear-jerking film, authentically, to have her as like this woman who's lost her husband, she lost her child, she's caring for other people's children. The problem I ran into is I feel like it doesn't really go beneath the surface to really examine who this woman is on a deeper level, really, until like the latter half, like you were saying. And for most of the movie, you're kind of just watching her go from place to place, and you're following this character who I don't find as compelling as I was hoping it to be. She isn't given a whole lot of dimension for me outside of just the caring maternal figure, which is fine. I just feel like there's not a lot of notes that she gets to play, unfortunately. So I think I was maybe a little bit frustrated by how the film really kind of is going along from episode to episode almost, and it doesn't really, for me, put in the work to make you really feel for the character outside of her situation and having to do with mothers and children. So I guess it's hard for me because I think she's bringing a lot to the material. It's just there wasn't enough for her, even with the amount that she's given, for me to really feel this character.
I understand that, and we've been talking about the other nominees who had they might not have had a lot of screen time, but they had a lot of material to play with. Whereas here, she has a lot of screen time and maybe not as much material to play with. And I think the second half of this film, particularly the third act, is by far more exceptional than the others, because I do understand, the episodics of she gets a family, she spends 20 minutes with them, and then she leaves for X or Y reasons. She goes to another family, and then it's basically repeating. And then real story actually happens, or drama happens at the end of the film, which was impactful to me because, I understand those feelings of, taking care of children and the relationship that you have with them, even though there's no blood. You're playing a role in their growing up, which is a very privileged role to have in someone that, especially if it's not your child. I wish the material around her was at her level, because I do think she is giving a lot. So particularly at the end where, it involves the child that has like neglectful parents, essentially, where they're just
Hmm.
not in his life for the first 8 years and they just like left him with her, which, oh my God. But
Yeah, that's tough to watch too.
I wish we spent majority of the film there in that home,
I agree.
maybe 30 minutes, going from house to house, and then an hour, maybe 45 minutes with that one boy. So by the time the parents do come back, even though that scene in the police station is, in my opinion, very impactful, and I think she's giving it a lot there, it would have been so much more impactful if we spent a lot of time with this one child where you could see that the relation it's a little bit more than nanny and client's patient and then client's child. It's more maternal in that sense, so it would have made it more impactful in my opinion, but I do think she's giving a lot in that scene. And
Yeah,
on top of that, with her aging from 30 to what, 60 years old, like
something like that.
she's
Hmm.
aging like 30 years throughout the course of this film, which is a lot. And I don't think common for this time. So to see her do that arc physically really well was amazing to watch, in my opinion.
Yeah, she does make that feel natural, at least. It doesn't feel like. I mean, I've encountered a few times on just from doing the show where we have had women aging over many decades, and the makeup work by the end is just a little bit silly, to be quite honest. Whereas
Oh,
here, I do think it's more definitely realistic, and she even plays it slower in those older scenes. So she definitely does the arc of the character. Again, by the end you really feel the a weight of all of her experiences. It's just that, like, the first few cycles are just not really all that engaging for me personally. There's this,
which I get.
yeah, I think there's one interesting part where she goes to work with this actress, played by Joan
Hmm.
Blondell, and she's caring for a very young Natalie Wood, future Best Actress
Yep.
nominee that I'll be talking about down the line. And the girl just becomes very attached to her to the point of calling her her mother. But Louise doesn't really want that and decides to just sort of break it off. And that's a scene that I think is actually one of her better scenes, where she's actually struggling to break it to this young girl that she has to move on. And you can sense this internal conflict there where she doesn't necessarily want to leave, but she recognizes that she probably needs to for the benefit of this family situation. And I feel like that also sets up things pretty nicely for the last family situation that you were talking about, where, you know, the father goes off to war and gets injured, and then the mother goes off to be with him in England, and then leaving their own child alone with Louise, who then has to raise him for all these years, and, eventually coming back and wanting that kid again. We finally have some real conflict going on where
Yeah.
Louise feels like she's earned the right to be this kid's mother after they've abandoned him. And it's so wrenching, where they're at the attorney's office and they're trying to settle this. And she feels like they're taking her own child away from her, even though it's technically not her child. And that she was more of a mother to her than his own mother ever was. You just really feel the pain there, and you feel the toll of the years that have gone by.
No, yeah, it's tough. Yeah, you feel those you feel the emotion of, yeah, this whole term of like it takes a village to raise a child, and
Mm-hmm.
you never know, just to open your heart to something is vulnerable in itself. And the fact that she does it time and time again, knowing that there's going to be a goodbye and there's going to be pain, and just to see her go through that over and over again is super duper tough to watch. You always hate those scenes where you have to say, I'm leaving, and it's goodbye forever, which is really sad because you have a very impactful presence on a young person's life when you're caring for them. Essentially, you are that motherly figure, even though you're not the actual mom. To have that conversation of what is a mother, with the police station, with the actual mom who, when she says, she doesn't even know his favorite color or what he likes to
Mm-hmm.
eat. Or I went to the doctor's office with him when he had measles, and I was the one praying for him and taking him to school and doing all those things that, an adult does when they're caring for the child. And it's not fun, but it's a really impactful, conversation of, the difference between a mother and a mom,
Yeah.
and, what it means to, to have children and to care for the children and to be aware of, what you're doing when you become a child. And also the fact that she's raising all these people essentially as a live-in nanny, but she also technically doesn't have anyone. And
Mm.
it's a very, to see her, hold on to it as tight as she can, when they try to take who she sees as her son, when you are with someone day in and day out for 8 years, that's a lot. And
It's a lot.
it was really heartbreaking, when she had to break the news to the boy, or as they were taking the boy away. It was so heartbreaking. And to see her, fight for him was, that's the testament of a mother. And that was really heartbreaking and very impactful to watch.
Hmm. Yeah, and speaking to the fact that she doesn't really have much outside of this situation, I did want to just point to another part of the film earlier on where she has the opportunity to actually be with someone. And it's like this family that she works with where she meets the tutor of one of the sons, and she has this connection with him, and she's going to a party and she's sort of imagining that this could be her life, because that there's part of her that wants that sense of adventure, which they establish in another scene, like how she's kind of dazzled by this guy's adventures all over the world. So eventually he proposes to her and she accepts, but then the mother in that family actually convinces him that he's being like too hasty, and that there's another scene where Jane Wyman, I think, is having to do a lot of reacting too, more than anything, where he lets her down and they talk about, waiting a few months to see if they want to go through with it, but then obviously nothing ever comes of it.
Which again, I like.
Yeah.
Reactionary acting it's my thing, and it's hard. It's rare for some reason. We don't see that a lot. We gravitate towards the extrovert when it comes to performance, and when you can see someone think on camera, where like they're not saying anything, but you see their mind working. I love that. I think it's so fascinating. I think it's probably something that can't be taught. It's just you either can do it or you can't,
Yeah.
and she can do it. So I love that type of acting, and I think that's more impactful and more, and I think it's stronger in my opinion than having this long monologue with tears and snot and yelling. To see the mind think and to see her come up with these thoughts and this decision and then make the decision. I think it's so cool that, an actor can convey that without doing anything. It's so freaking cool.
Mm.
And to see her, think of, okay, he's kind of into me, but this is very impulsive. I have this boy at home that loves me and I love
Yep.
him, that needs me. He needs me, and he doesn't deserve this heartbreak,
Right.
and to see her think that and go through that mental checklist to come up with a decision of, you know what, I'm going to go back to my boy because he really does need me. He's scared of thunder, and we could write, if it works out, it works out. If not, I'll find another family and maybe we'll meet up. And I loved seeing that train of thought.
Yeah. And like, that sort of is another thing that makes this nomination unique compared to the rest here, where she is indeed the only sole lead that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And yet she also feels like she's the most reactive type of character, because she really doesn't have those bigger moments. A little bit in the end, of course, when she's fighting for the boy. But for the most part, it's very, very reactive type of acting and subtle. Compared to the rest here, there's not a whole lot of subtlety. All due respect, there's
Oh
just
no,
a lot
yeah, the
of,
50s or
yeah,
classic Hollywood's not known for subtlety.
exactly. So that is definitely what makes this nomination unique in this group. And then the last segment that we can talk about, where she's now considered too old to be a caretaker to children, which is ridiculous. But she's assigned to be a janitor at an elementary school, and she has, the old age makeup is on now, and she's realizing that she's going to the eye doctor and that he's someone she used to care for as a child. And you see like that sense of pride, and then having him arrange to have all the kids that she cared for come to see her again.
Like, come on. Like that was like How do you not like smile from ear to ear and be like, stop it? Like
It's a very sweet ending.
it's such a sweet ending, and time is weird like that because you expect all your kids to stay kids. So when they're
Yeah.
adults, to see, the impact that she had on all of these lives was so touching and so beautiful. And again, it's a very sweet way to leave off the film of, to care for a child is, and to love a child is, one of the most like privileged thing you can do is to have like a very impactful place on someone's life. And it means a lot to them and they don't forget it. And I think it's a very sweet message. And I think it's pure and wholesome and just all the warm feelings. And I think it's really sweet and beautiful.
I also just wanted to mention that Jane Wyman apparently said that this was the most meaningful project in her career.
Aww.
Having actually been through the experience herself of losing a child before.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely meant a lot to her. And even if I don't think the film is as great as she is, as you're saying, I'm glad that maybe she got something cathartic out of the experience of filming it. I feel like you definitely feel the investment from her in this role.
Yeah, you could tell that she is by far the best part of this movie. And you could tell that there's weight to it with her performance. And again, the only unfortunate part is I wish the film was somewhat near her level as she is, because she really is elevating it to several levels.
Well, let's move on to our big winner here, Vivien Leigh in A Streetcar Named Desire. Winning her second Oscar. Only Bette Davis and Louise Reiner had won multiple Best Actress awards up to this point in Oscar history. And what makes her situation unique is that she won her first Oscar for Gone with the Wind in 1939, and her second here is in 1951. So that's 12 years later. Quite a break, and no nominations in between that. Although she doesn't work all that much, at least in film, in between those two wins. So I guess there weren't a whole lot of opportunities for her to get nominated. But in the years leading up to this, A Streetcar Named Desire is this big stage show on Broadway. Jessica Tandy is in this role, who we will talk about way down the line on this show. She actually wins a Tony for her performance on Broadway. And then Vivien Leigh actually starred in the London production, which happened to be directed by her husband, Laurence Olivier. And then for this film adaptation, she's joining Marlon Brando, Kim Hunter, and Carl Malden, who all did this on Broadway. So basically, just switch out Jessica Tandy for Vivien Leigh. Sorry, Jessica. Apparently, Olivia de Havilland and Bette Davis were also offered the part first, but they declined. And for those who don't know, A Streetcar Named Desire, it is about a Southern belle named Blanche Dubois, played by Vivien, who doesn't have much of a choice but to move in with her sister Stella and her big, brash, sexy husband, Stanley. And Blanche doesn't really get along very well with Stanley. He's often trying to prove that she's not as innocent as she seems, essentially in an effort to get her to leave. But she also meets one of Stanley's friends, Mitch, and they fall for each other. But when Stanley is able to uncover some things about her past and reveals it to Mitch, everything just goes into haywire. Let's talk about this iconic performance. It's one that a few people on this show have come on and said is their favorite Best Actress win of all time. So tell me your thoughts on Vivien Leigh and her big win here.
Where do I begin?
Right?
I don't even know. Streetcar is one of my favorite plays of all time. This film adaptation is one of my favorite films of all time. I watched it, my first time watching it was with my grandma. And I think we started the movie, it was on TV, and I think it started at like 10:30 at night. So we pulled like an all-nighter because by the time this film ended, it was like 12:30, and I'm just like, I think I'm 12 or 11 or 13, and I'm just shocked at having material for a little too early, but I definitely got it. I was about to go into my theater-based high school or something like that, and I was just, my mind exploded by this film. And my grandma was just like, yep, that's Streetcar. And I'm just like, oh my God. And I immediately bought the play and just like tore up that script. And it's one of the greatest plays of American theater for a reason, and Blanche Dubois is one of the roles that every actress wants to play at some point in her life. She's just so meaty, and there's so much for her to do. And it's actually kind of common for actresses. They want to start with the sister and move to Blanche. There's like a really awesome trajectory of, an aging actors where they could start with one of these roles and then normally the supporting role and then work up to the lead at some point in their life. Like they'll start off with Mitch and then go to Stanley, or they'll start off with Stella and then a couple of years later they'll do Blanche. It's really cool to watch when that happens. And this is it's so good. I think this is such a great ensemble. I think this is a great production, even though this is definitely a copy and paste adaptation of the play. It's definitely falling into that category and that theme of, just take the play, put a camera on it. We know that this is one of the actor studios classes where, they're all from the same acting school. They all did the method and they all like lived, breathed, and slept this play and these roles. And you can tell that all the actors know these characters inside, out, upside down. They know exactly, what their intentions are, what they mean, and what they don't mean. And it's really amazing to watch a company essentially just know exactly what's going on, and they're so aware, and it's very theatrical, where it does feel like a train's going and they're just on it, and you're either on it or you're off, or you miss the train, and they are on it. And it's just, I haven't seen an ensemble so tightly packed in some time. So I feel like not only is she one of the greatest wins of all time, but it's probably one of the greatest acting ensembles of all time. I think they're all great, all four of them. And even though Vivien Leigh wasn't on Broadway with them, she played the role before, so she knows this part. And so she's equally as strong as all of them. And I think they all elevate each other so well. And once you see this film, you understand why she won. Like she blows it out of the water, and it's complicated, it's messy, it's likable, it's unlikable. You feel for her, you hate her, you despise her. You have all of these mixed feelings that only Tennessee Williams' words combined with Leigh's acting. It's magnetic and it's interesting. And what a power move of her to walk onto the Oscar scene with Gone with the Wind, leave, and then come back with Streetcar Named Desire, and just like
incredible.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what a legend. So yeah, I think it's one of the greatest leading actresses of all time. And once you see it, that's the argument. Like, she just proves it, and you can't argue after watching it. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, this is a towering performance. And what's interesting for me is that sometimes as the years go by and you haven't watched something again, even if it's something great, you can be less enthusiastic about it just because it's not top of mind. And that's sort of how I feel like it's been with this performance, which, I've always ranked as one of the greatest Best Actress wins of all time, but I feel like your opinion can change once you see more and more and you want to champion certain performances that aren't as recognized, But then watching this again, it's like, oh, no, this is the best. Like, this is just...
Yeah, and sometimes you get afraid to rewatch things that you love because you feel like it's going to die down. Like, Titanic's my favorite film. I think I've seen it 4 times fully because I'm afraid that effect is going to leave me. And that's the same thing with this film. Like, you don't want the wonder or the excitement to fade, but every time you see it, from like the opening scene, you're like, it's going to go down. And then from when that climactic scene between Blanche and Stanley is about to start, you're on the edge of your seat, even though you know what's going to happen. And even though you know what's the downfall is going to happen within the scene and what they're going to say and how they're going to say it, you know that you're about to see 2 of the greatest actors in one of the best scenes of all time. And they prove it again and again and again. And there is that shock again and again and again. And it's kind of fascinating that this film, after all these years and after all of these rewatches, that it still has that same effect. It's not a lot of films can do that.
This is just one of those performances where the actor also manages to really blend in so seamlessly with the character. And it's like I just talked about last week with Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard, where an actor is just lending their own experience to the role and going to some dark, dark places in showing that to the world. Because Vivien Leigh dealt with mental illness. She was reported to have, bipolar disorder. and she really struggled with that. And I don't want to speak to her process or anything, but I feel like you can see her channeling some of those struggles in this performance. And there's this meta element to it too, where Blanche has a certain performative aspect to her as like the Southern Belle,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of how she copes with what's really going on beneath the surface, which is just this deep depression. I mean, if I were to speculate, like, you could see where Vivien might relate to that in a few ways, like as an actress. And she would say later on that playing Blanche, she said it tipped her into madness.
Oh, I bet. Yeah,
So
this is like,
yeah, you feel the toll by the end, especially.
it's yeah, it's Blanche is one of the great roles for a reason. I don't know any actress who doesn't want to play this part. There's so much you can do with her, and there's so much to play with and to explore and to take different interpretations of it. Even back then, she's such a rarity for how complicated and tragic, and the way that the script and the screenplay just peels back the layers, where they give you moments where the actress can show the audience just a little piece of the horror that Blanche has gone through in her life, but then immediately puts back on that facade. It's very meta and it's very interesting, whether it's on film or on stage. She's a gem of a character, and it would be an absolute joy, I bet, for any actress to get their hands on her. So the fact that Vivien's able to, I don't know if elevate's the right word, but she's such a great candidate and she's such a great actress for this part that normally with, iconic roles, you don't really associate like an actor to them. Like whether it's like Romeo or Juliet or Hamlet or any of these great plays, there's so many different interpretations of the character, which is what, acting in theater is for. It's for, different spins on it. But this cast in particular, like when you think Streetcar, you think of these guys, and that's like the shoes that every actor kind of has to fill. They have to like get to, Brando and Hunter and Lee and everyone, and it's kind of amazing how each actor, particularly Lee, just encompasses the whole nature of the character, and they do it so well that I don't see Vivien Leigh when I see this character, and she's an icon at this point. Like everyone knows Vivien Leigh in Hollywood by the time this film comes out. So the fact that she's able to completely disappear into this really tragic, interesting, perplexing woman, it's crazy good. It's like a magic trick right before your very eyes. Like you don't see her at all, and it's such a departure, especially for people who only know her from Gone with the Wind, which I understand, but guys, like, look into her filmography. It's great.
Yeah.
But it's such a departure where you can't see any of that innocent, naive ingenue anymore. But you see someone trying to get back to it.
Right.
It's so good.
Yeah. And of course she meets Stanley, and there's this charge between them, and it's hard to not take notice of Marlon Brando here and like how he's styled and his build. And he's just kind of like this perfect specimen, and she just can't really help but to take notice just as much as we do.
Yeah, she's a natural woman. Yeah.
Yes. And there's obviously a lot to this story. I don't think we should go through every scene by any means, or we'll be here all day. But just to talk broadly about, this relationship between her and Stanley, sometimes I honestly forget just how dark it gets and how sort of contradictory this relationship is.
Yep.
Where the two of them are on such opposite ends of the spectrum, where he's very raw and grounded and hyper masculine and primitive, and she's kind of living in a fantasy world and is very delicate and fragile, and they naturally bump up against each other, where she can't stand how primitive he is, and he thinks that she's just whatever, full of hot air.
He's desperately trying to get her back down to earth and expose her, and she's desperately trying to not let that happen. And they're both equally passionate and strong about their views and about their stance. So it's so awesome and so interesting to see that war happen throughout the entire film. Yeah. Especially with Stella right in the middle trying to make peace, but these two are just at each other the entire time because one wants something, one doesn't want something, and they're both going to fight like hell to make sure that they win. And it's a really awesome character relationship, and Vivien Leigh and Marlon Brando. elevate that so much where you think that they had experience with each other. They weren't on Broadway together. It's kind of interesting that Vivien Leigh is the only one that's new, even though she played the role before. She didn't play the role with these people. So even though, you know, we could assume that there was obviously rehearsal and all that stuff, but she feels like she was always there. And that's just a testament to, you know, the actor studio back then, and that's just a testament to the direction. And them together, they really do have this fight it's intriguing, it's sexy. Again, you forget how dangerous they are together, where you're, you know, kind of hoping for it, but then you realize, oh no, this is not good. Stop it.
Not at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So you forget, but that's just they're so electric together, and you have to clock that you're witnessing one of the greatest actors of all time in the greatest roles of their careers doing absolute banger after banger, because it's not just one scene, it's every single scene that they're in together, every fight that they're in. You know, one loses and one wins, and you see them celebrate their victory and the other one being like, oh, we're gonna have a rematch soon, don't worry.
Yeah. And it's so messy, you know, because he's so nasty to her.
Messy.
But there's so much passion there too, even if it's hatred. That their scenes together are so engrossing. And I think maybe just on a meta level, again, the fact that she is coming in as this new person, Vivien Leigh, with this troupe of 3 actors who have done this all before many, many times on stage. I think that probably maybe even helped in their performances, right? Like, because that's what the story kind of is.
Yeah, that is the story. So yeah, I haven't really thought about that. That makes sense. That's I think they're just like the entire chemistry, but it's weird. She's an outsider, yet it makes perfect sense. It's kind of like oil and water where like they don't mix, but when you shake it, everything flows together. So everyone is reacting at the same time. Everyone's like, the train is moving, as you know, or the analogy goes. And even though she is an outsider, she is trying so hard to fit in, and they're letting her fit in until they're not. Right. And it's so cool to watch her react and act in that environment.
Yes. And the other interesting storyline is her exploring this new relationship with Mitch, played by Karl Malden. But it takes her a little bit to really have that relationship turn into romance, and it culminates in that scene between the two of them on their date. And he tries to kiss her, but she kind of like rebuffs him, and she tells this long story about her past. Her former lover died by suicide, and she feels responsible for it because she didn't understand why they couldn't make it work, and she lashed out at him. I think in the play it's suggested that, you know, he was gay and sort of tormented by that, but that's not really stated explicitly in the film. Again, Hays Code. But that scene, you know, the arc that she goes on of just recounting that memory, which was very, very traumatic for her, to the point of almost like
she has a breakdown,
snapping her out of reality. She brings so much vulnerability and so much rawness that I honestly would describe it as uncomfortable, because it feels so real and so immediate to me.
Yeah, you feel the pain. You feel it's like she's taking off a mask. That's slowly, it's coming off the entire film, obviously. And part of it is because Stanley is trying so hard to rip it off. And this is kind of a point where she is choosing to take it off just for a split second, and she's puts it right back on. And I think it's really interesting, because I think the way that they shoot it too, with her with light the entire time, she doesn't want to be in the light. She doesn't want people to see her fully, because she's hiding all of this stuff. And I think it's such a great scene where she chooses to show everything, and then she gets a weird reaction from it. Which, you know, naturally it's a heavy story. And she immediately puts it back on and tries to be, you know, everything's okay, I'm perfect, we're all good, just stay at a distance because I don't want to get too close, don't look at me fully. That was always an interesting situation, because it's a cry for help, yet she doesn't really get it. So she puts everything back in the box and tries to close it.
Pretty much, yeah. And she has that scene later on where Mitch comes in drunk, and now he's heard the whole story about her having this past where she turned to, you know, sex work, and she was also expelled for having an affair with one of her students, and she's really on the defensive, you know, and even when he questions like how truthful she is, she has this incredible line of dialogue, which I wrote down, where she says, "I don't want realism, I want magic." Yes, yes, magic. I try to give that to people. I do misrepresent things. I don't tell the truth. I tell what ought to be the truth.
Oh, Blanche. Yeah.
Yes. And that really spells out Blanche's whole character.
I mean,
Like,
yeah, that's the character. I always
yeah,
think there's either a line of dialogue or a description in the script that's basically the character. Like
yeah,
100% that's what it is. And that's Blanche right there. And her Lee's performance of that line really
mm,
showcases how desperately she believes in that and how much she kind of is forcing herself to believe in that.
yeah,
Because there's a part of her that knows, this isn't right, but she is so in survivor mode
hmm,
and she can't get out of survivor mode. So when the point where she doesn't know how to live without the trauma or without going back to it, she can't associate it with anymore, to the point where the only way she can survive is to disassociate. It was just too much for her. And you see her desperately trying to cling on to that fantasy where she knows that everyone's trying to rip it down and get her to see, what really is happening in this reality, but she can't do it. It's just too painful.
yeah,
And it's a very heartbreaking moment, but that's Blanche and she's admitting to it and she's aware of it, but she's like, this is the way I can survive. I can't survive it the way you guys do anymore because I've just been through too much.
exactly. And I love also when she does just let her guard down in that moment where he's really grilling her about her affairs with men. And she said she stayed at a hotel called the Tarantula Arms. And she says, "I've had many meetings with strangers." And her voice drops. And it feels like now
Yeah.
we're seeing the real her, like completely exposed, no artifice. And
She's
those
at the light.
moments, yeah, yeah. And those moments where she speaks in a lower register is very effective and show really how in control she is of this character, as much as she was with, Scarlet and Gone with the Wind. It's incredible moment. So then, of course, we have the end, which is this other masterclass moment where
Oof.
she's gone through this horrible experience with Stanley, and they've arranged for her to go to a mental hospital, and they sort of
She's Yeah, she's just completely broken.
yes, exactly. She's detached from reality at
Hmm.
this point. And they sort of delude her, or she's deluding herself, or some combo of both, that she's going away with one of her suitors. She realizes what's happening eventually, and she resists. And this is where you really feel the exhaustion, honestly, and how taxing this role must have been. But even after all that struggle, the doctor shows a little bit of grace, and that's all she needs to go back to her sort of fantasy world in a way. And she has her definitive final line: "I've always depended on the kindness of
Kindness of
strangers."
strangers.
Yes.
It is a moment that, again, no matter how many times you rewatch it, you are speechless after it.
Yeah.
There's
It's a good word for
you're
it.
watching the credits and you're just stunned in that moment because you witness such a great, it's a horrible tragic arc, but it is such a beautifully constructed arc through Lee's portrayal where every moment and every beat is so carefully thought through and so
Hmm.
perfectly executed that it will hit every time and
Yeah.
you will literally just sit there for a couple of minutes to gather your thoughts because she leaves you in such a trance where your heart is so broken for this woman.
Mm.
Yet it's a speechless moment where you're incapable of gathering thoughts, which does not happen a lot through film. It is you've just witnessed one of the greatest performances of all time where this actress pushed you through the ringer and she carried you with her where the point once she drops you, you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I haven't had that experience with an actor with the repeated watching. Like it's the performance plus
I
the
know.
repeated watching. Like you know what's going to happen, you know where she's going to take you, yet you
Hmm.
still can't pick yourself back up after it. It takes you a couple minutes to recalibrate. That just shows how much A, she knew the character, B, how comfortable she is in the filmed version of it because there is an element of adaptation with the acting. She's not going to mezzanine, she's going just to the camera. She knows how to make it intimate and make it more powerful for the camera.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
she nails it every single time where again you're kind of paralyzed, and that doesn't happen a lot with rewatchings.
Yeah, she poured everything into this role and exposed every vulnerability she had, every insecurity. It's basically the same thing I said last week with Gloria Swanson. It's so raw that you can almost be made uncomfortable because that's not something a lot of
Hmm.
audiences are used to, let alone in 1951.
Oh, yeah, and you feel it, and it's you feel every single nerve on your body stick up. It's kind of like as she's peeling away her layers, she's peeling away the audience's layers,
Yeah.
and she's forcing the audience to go with her.
Hmm.
And that doesn't happen I've seen a lot of you see a lot of actors go for it, but there is an element of it's through the camera. It's kind of detached where you could stay in your safe place, as an audience member.
Right.
Not here. You are with her. You are in the bunker. You are on the ground with her, and you're getting exposed too. So you feel uncomfortable. You feel exposed as well by the end of it.
You do.
And
Hmm.
it's such a great showcase of acting and acting through camera and acting in film.
Couldn't put it any better than that. I think that's a great transition point into discussing why she won that award. I think that's pretty obvious just based on our level of praise for this, even compared to the other performances we've praised on this show. This was more or less a foregone conclusion that Vivien would
Yep.
win this Oscar. Again, just the level of difficulty, the kind of role that it is, nobody could even really compete with what she was given.
It would have been such a crime if
Yeah.
it didn't happen. Like that would have been one of the biggest like mistakes in Oscar history.
Yeah, I agree. From what I understand, just from reading from Inside Oscar, there were people campaigning. Like, there were ads that were placed for people like Eleanor Parker. Shelley Winters was very active on the campaign trail. Katharine Hepburn, she didn't really give a shit about any of this. So,
Oh,
like,
what a
she could just be
legend.
herself and still get 4 wins in her lifetime. But still, she was who she was. So,
Hmm.
in a way, she was maybe in it. But yeah, I think generally speaking that Vivien Leigh was the foregone winner here, and there's really not a lot of discussion that can be even had about why she won this, why the others lost. It's just look at the performance, look at
Just
the
watch
characters.
watch the movie.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did read a funny story from Shelley Winters where apparently she said in one of her memoirs that she was there at the Oscars that night and she thought that she heard her name being called at that time. She said, this is her writing. She said, when he opened the envelope, I'll swear to this day, he said Shelley Winters. I was almost almost to the steps leading up to
Aw.
the stage when Vittorio tackled me.
And what's funny, like Vivien Leigh wasn't there.
She was not there. She was
Like
on stage,
that's
right?
yeah. Yeah, she's an actor.
Yes.
It's that was like the funniest thing. It's one of the best wins of the category, and she was not even there to accept it.
Yeah.
And just because she was acting, it was
Yeah. Apparently she also said that she thought Katharine Hepburn would win.
uh,
So
that sounds like her.
that's very humble.
Yeah.
If I gave that performance, I'd be like, yeah, I mean, I'm probably gonna win. So
But yeah,
like,
you gotta know, like after that take, she had to been like, I killed it.
nah, I mean,
Like,
I got
not
this one.
don't mean to
Yeah,
be cocky, but that was great.
yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, there's not a lot to discuss there with the horse race of it all, but we could definitely get into a little bit more with these questions that we got from Twitter real quick. Katori said Scarlett O'Hara versus Blanche Dubois. Who wins?
Like from
I
an
don't know
acting
exactly
perspective, like
what perspective that is, like
yeah,
in a fight. I'd say Scarlett would win in
Scarlett
a fight.
would be more feisty.
She'd be scrappy. Yeah. Blanche
Blanche would
Dubois is
try her
very
best to
delicate.
persuade out of the fight.
Yes,
Be
that's
like,
true.
darling, we're Southern. We don't got to do this. We are ladies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll choose to use that interpretation as what that question is. Um, moving on to Fritz. You can give the best actor actress combo to A Place in the Sun, A Streetcar Named Desire, or African Queen. Which one is it?
It has to be Streetcar. I still don't understand how Brando lost to Bogart.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is again, that's a confusing. I love Humphrey Bogart. I think The African Queen is a great film. I think it's very fun and it's very exciting. But I think we're comparing like cars to Ferraris here with Streetcar.
Well, there you have it.
And yeah, I don't understand how, just like how Vivien Leigh, she is a shoo-in. I think Brando is also a shoo-in. No hate to Humphrey Bogart, but I don't understand. I just think it's star power.
Yes. As much as it pains me to deny Montgomery Clift, it's got to be the Streetcar combo for me. But yeah, I mean, Clift and Winters would be close, not too close, but
Oh no, yeah, there's a little bit of a race there.
Yeah. Zoe G said, do you think Olivia de Havilland, the original casting choice for Blanche, would have given as good a performance as Vivien Leigh?
I bet she's pissed about this whole situation.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
I feel like Leigh was cast for star power, right? Like she was like for box office or something of that nature. Which sucks. I mean, she won the Tony for it. I mean, she did a good job, and she is the first person.
No, that's actually Jessica Tandy, not Olivia de Havilland.
Okay. So like she did a great job with it.
Yeah.
It's gotta suck. It's kind of like with Dolly Parton with "I Will Always Love You," and then Whitney Houston just kills it.
Yeah, that's
You're just
true.
like, damn, you know?
Yeah. For Olivia de Havilland, I think she would have gone full method with it, as she did with a lot of films at this time. For Jessica Tandy, I think, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say if she would have fully gone as great as Vivien Leigh. Hard to say.
It would have been good, but I think Leigh, she really understands how to act to camera.
Yes.
And I think that's what puts it over the edge and why it's one of the greatest performances, because you really do see the adaptation of the role. Whereas even though the other actors in this film are phenomenal, there is definitely theatricality in their performances.
Yeah.
Where I see a lot of intimacy with Leigh in Streetcar.
Right. Jeffrey Kerr said, both of Vivien Leigh's Oscar wins came from the only 2 nominations she received. Are there any other performances from her that she deserved recognition for?
Ooh, good question.
The 2 big ones outside of those are that Hamilton Woman and
Waterloo.
Bridge. Waterloo Bridge, yeah.
Again, I really do love the fact that these are her only 2.
Yeah.
I think it's such a move. I mean, I know she had no say in it, but I just love how she, comes on the scene with Gone with the Wind, wins, leaves, and then comes back with Streetcar Named Desire and just annihilates it. I think, and that's it. And then she leaves. And I think that's, like, what other, like, trophy room? Like, how do you compete with those 2? You just need those 2. And it's a perfect record. And you proved your point. You proved you're one of the greats.
Yeah. John T. actually asked basically the same question, saying that most, even film fans, claim they've only seen those 2. What is a role more people should know of hers? So definitely those 2. The only other one I've seen is Ship of Fools, which is her last film. I don't really remember her performance very much, to be honest. I'll have to rewatch it when I get there, because Simone Signoret is nominated for Best Actress for that film. Yeah, but she has a very small filmography, so... Kevin Clowder said, if you could swap Katharine Hepburn winning Best Actress for Marlon Brando winning Best Actor, would you?
Yes for Brando, no for Katharine. She's got 4. It's okay.
If that's the only combination, then I'll say no. I think it's fine how things worked out.
Yeah, it's fine how things worked out. It would be really cool for Katharine Hepburn to have 5 Oscars, to be like officially the most decorated.
Yeah.
But I like how Vivien has these 2.
Yes. Ayrton O'Brien said, did Kate deserve it for not throwing up on camera? Well, she's definitely a trooper, that's for sure. I did hear that it was a bit rocky filming this movie, and she got a bit queasy.
I mean, I can only imagine what those conditions were like.
Exactly. Christoph N. said, if you had to recast one of her fellow nominees to give Shelley Winters the role instead, which part would you be most interested to see her play? Wow. I think any of them.
Should give Shelley any of these roles?
Yeah, any of the other roles here.
I mean, again, I feel like any actress wants to play Blanche.
Yeah.
If you're not,
that would be fun for her.
If you're not like an actor that's like really in love with the craft of acting, I think Blanche Dubois is one of the greatest roles written for women. So, and she likes to get dirty, and she likes to get messy, and she likes to peel back the layers. So I think, I don't know how old she was in 1951, but I feel like Streetcar would be a really good home for her in any of those 2 roles.
Yeah. So we got a question from Christoph and Ben Miller and The Phoenix Rises about Eleanor Parker being in lead here. um, Basically asking, like, why did it happen? And, you know, if she got knocked down into supporting, like, what happens? Like, who gets in her place? First of all, I just think there was afterglow for her after the previous year's nomination. I think also the film Detective Story was well regarded enough to get other bigger nominations like directing and screenplay and all that. Yeah, I think that's about it. She was a leading lady star at the time. What can you say?
Yeah, we talked about it. It's
Yeah.
definitely not a leading acting performance, but it's a testament to her star power and I think her acting skill that she managed to get in here.
Andrew Carden said, would Shelley have triumphed in supporting? And furthermore, if she indeed prevails in 51, does she still win her Oscars for The Diary of Anne Frank and A Patch of Blue? Again, I think it would be close, but I think Kim Hunter still wins. But it does become more competitive.
Oh yeah, that becomes a race.
Yeah.
And I think Shelley was really close because again, that film was more successful than Streetcar.
Yeah, it was. And I think if she wins for this, then she probably loses one of those later on, but
I think
don't
she
think
still
she
wins
wins
Anne
three.
Frank.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Fritz said, do you prefer Liz or Shelley in A Place in the Sun? Putting us in the Montgomery Clift position, I suppose.
Shelley has more to do.
I prefer Shelley.
Yeah, she has more to do. There's other films that showcase Elizabeth Taylor.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
More on that later on in this show. Yes.
To be seen.
Yes. Sue Ellen Rossi said, The Blue Veil seems like a movie that would have fit in better in the previous decade as one of those soapy tearjerkers. I believe this film was popular in its day, but do you think the Academy saw it as dated compared to the other performances?
Probably from like the thematics of it. And then you talked about that, Kevin. Like from a narrative point, it's very sweet. It's very one-dimensional. It's very...
Yeah.
To care for children is the best thing ever, which is really sweet and cute. And it's not going as deep as any of these other women are with their roles.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think just she's doing so much in that film that she's really elevating how simple of a story she's in.
Chelsea said, rank our hot girlies of the category. Who would you cast now in these roles? So if we're doing this in the Chelsea sense of hot girl shit, because that is its own conversation, I'm putting Katharine Hepburn number one. I think she owned the shit out of that role. And she owned her sexuality and just put herself out there. That's hot girl shit to me.
Yeah, she's the most extroverted one.
Yes.
Who's next? Then maybe...
I guess Vivien Leigh, because she's very sexual.
Yeah, but she's so weak.
I know.
It's like, I was thinking just Winters, because she's so like, we're doing this. I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care if I don't like it. We're doing this.
And she bagged Montgomery Clift. That's some hot girl shit.
Yes, it is. That's
Eleanor Parker, let's talk about that. She was like...
gorgeous.
I'm going to abandon you at the end. Good for her. What do we do with Jane Wyman? I don't know if that's like a hot girl shit kind of part. Necessarily.
She's a nanny. Not that nannies can't be hot. They can be.
Right.
I take care of kids. I'm pretty cool. But yeah, she's... I think I would put Vivien Leigh above her.
Yeah.
You know,
Jane.
Yeah, she goes for it here.
Owen Daly said, if you were given the Best Actress nominees of 50 years later, who could you cast in each of these roles? Very fun question. That's a reminder. Judi Dench, Sissy Spacek, Nicole Kidman, Halle Berry, and Renee Zellweger. So I saw this question ahead of time, so I filled mine
you thought
out.
About it.
Yes, I did. So I'll say Judi Dench in The Blue Veil.
I immediately put Zellweger in Blanche. I think she would be really good.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I think she would have a lot of fun with that.
I would be interested to see Sissy Spacek, younger Sissy Spacek in the role of Blanche. Obviously, she's Southern.
Yeah.
She has a certain genteel quality to her that could lend itself to the role. I mean, you could even see Renee Zellweger in A Place in the Sun, I think.
Yeah.
That kind of role. Nicole Kidman in The African Queen.
Oh my God, 100%.
Yes.
Yes.
I want that now, actually.
Yes, I could see that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I guess Halle Berry in Detective Story could be good.
Halle
I
Berry
could
would
see
be
her
good
in a
in.
lot of these.
She could do. I would love to see. Yeah, she would be good there. She would be good in African Queen as well. Even though Kidman would
Yeah.
definitely kill it. Like that's perfect
Yeah.
casting. I can't
Yeah.
compete with that.
Yeah. I think any of them could really pull off a lot of these roles. Patrick Stokes said, given that a few essentially supporting roles made it through to Best Actress this year, how close do you think Jan Sterling got for Ace in the Hole? And then Miles McHale said, why wasn't Leslie Caron, who eventually scored 2 actress nominations, considered for a film that ended up winning Best Picture for An American in Paris? So for both of those, I think they were both close because they liked that film, both films, clearly,
Yeah, they had
enough
to be.
to nominate them. But for Leslie Caron, she was very young. She was only 20 years old in An American in Paris, so maybe age had something to do with it. It's a light part, so there's that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of ingenues. I think the only first time
True.
nominee was Winters.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you gotta nominate that one, no matter what category she was in.
Mm-hmm.
Again, she's in a very strong film. And she bumped up because there's 2 women in the film and she's the most prominent woman. I think that's like how she got in the category that she got in.
Mm-hmm.
The rest are other nominees and former winners, so it's that we see that argument today where, it's a lot easier for repeated winners and repeated nominees to make it.
Yep. And then finally, Cinema Sex Kitten said, 1951 is the year I Love Lucy debuts on television. Rank these actresses by how much you would have loved to see them guest star opposite Lucille Ball.
Well, Hepburn obviously is number 1.
Yes.
That
And she actually worked with
right?
Lucille Ball
Yeah,
in
she worked
Stage
with
Door.
them. Yeah.
So that would have been a fun little reunion.
Yeah.
Throw in Shelley Winters. I think she's good in the sitcom format. She was on Roseanne. She could do that sort of thing. I don't really think the other 3 would really fit into
Vivien
that world
wouldn't
very
do
well.
It.
Vivien Leigh would be wild. I don't even know what that would look like.
I think she would straight up reject it.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, on that note, we are now at our final segment where we discuss who we think was the runner-up to Vivien Leigh. I think this is a very interesting question because theoretically it could be any of them. Lauren, what do you think? Who's the runner-up here?
This is tough because it's such an obvious number 1 that placing everyone else is very difficult because we have an all-time legend. We have a film that's very popular that probably was competing with, the Best Picture winner. And we have no Best Picture winner nominees in this category. So that throws that off.
Yep.
And there's people that are technically in the wrong category here. So it's kind of like, do I favor the real leading actress? Do I favor the stronger film? Do I favor the legend? There's a lot of different ways you can take this road. But I think I'm going with, I feel like Winters, because the film is so strong, it did win more than Streetcar. Again, it doesn't make sense because it's her first nomination. She's kind of not in the right category. But A Place in the Sun won Best Director, won Best Screenplay, won Best Editing. These are very big wins, especially nowadays when, you're projecting a winner, that I think she could have been number 2.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I think the runner-up was Shelley Winters. Yeah, I think you're right that, it's clearly a beloved film. It won 6 Oscars, including 2 big ones. She, I think, maybe even had an appeal of being a fresh face compared to everyone else. And I think the part was certainly sympathetic, clearly. She, as much as we can count things like this at this time, she was nominated for a Golden Globe. Technically, she lost, but both she and Vivien Leigh lost to Jane Wyman. So I think Jane Wyman was possibly in the winning discussion, but she had won very, very recently for Johnny Belinda, so I don't think they were in the mood for that. Yeah, I think it was Shelley.
Yeah.
I do. Despite category placement.
Yeah, which makes us think if she was this close here, what would have happened?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I think, Vivien Leigh probably gets 90% of the votes here. To be
honest.
No,
it's definitely by a long shot, Vivien Leigh.
And final question for you. This is, I'm sure, very obvious, but just as a formality, Lauren, who would you have voted for in this lineup?
Oh, I am voting for Vivien Leigh.
Wow.
I am I will happily be basic in this situation.
Yeah, I will also go along with the tide that would absolutely vote for Vivien Leigh. Really, nobody else comes close. All due respect to the rest of them, I think.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good lineup on the whole, despite the weird category stuff. I think these are all great performances, but Vivien Leigh is towering to me. So
yeah, it's no disrespect to any of these other ladies. They did great work, but this is, the fact that no one's come close to, this portrayal of this character since, and probably ever will, after all these years later, says something. And it is a lightning in a bottle performance that probably won't be topped. So you can't compete.
Yes, you really can't. Well, on that note, Lauren, truly thank you so much for doing this. And it was such a blast talking to you solo here for the first time.
It was so much fun.
Yes. So I would gladly have you on for the future. We can certainly talk Kate Winslet.
Please, any of them.
Yes.
There's so many.
Well, tell the people where they could find more of you on the internet.
You guys can find me on the Twitter at Lauren LaMagna.
Yes. Please follow Lauren. She's a great follow.
We're so much fun.
Yes.
We got movies, we got Survivor, we got everything.
Yes.
So much fun.
All the things that I care for, really.
Yes.
Well, thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson and the show's at Oscar Runner Up. Instagram at And the Runner Up is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you liked what you heard and want to hear more, patreon.com/andtherunnerup is, where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes, including some with our friend Lauren here. And next week, we'll be talking about the 1952 Best Actress race. The nominees were Shirley Booth for Comeback Little Sheba, Joan Crawford for Sudden Fear, Bette Davis for The Star, Julie Harris for The Member of the Wedding, and Susan Hayward for With a Song in My Heart, with the winner being Shirley Booth. So that's what to watch before next week. Thank you so much again, Lauren.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun. I loved doing this little trip down the time capsule.
Well, with that, I will bid you all adieu.